Marvel. The Eye Saga begins with Mutant. Chapter 41. Siberia Ice Field, Mutant Evolution Home Base. Lancelot stood in this empty and huge base that looked like a small city, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Here will be the beginning of his mutant kingdom. The Soviet Union was sparsely populated, enough for Lancelot to toss around at will. My lord, I have brought over some of my comrades from the number 1 base of the Mutant Evolution House. When Lancelot was looking at the base, in front of Lancelot, Mystique Raven walked over with a group of scientists. Very good, Raven. Lancelot looked at Mystique Raven walking over, nodded in satisfaction, and then let Raven stand by his side, looking towards the opposite side. My king. Under Lancelot's gaze, everyone knelt on one knee and shouted frantically to Lancelot. Many of these people are old-fashioned, but they are full of vitality, and each of them is more energetic than young people. Especially Dr. Leonard and Dr. Graham standing in front of the scientists. Dr. Graham was almost 70 years old, but his eyes were radiant, and half of his original white hair had turned black at this moment. As for Dr. Leonard, the changes are even more astonishing. He was old and dying, but now he is tall and straight, and the wrinkles on his face have completely disappeared. If it wasn't for his gray hair, he would even be younger than a 30-year-old, young. Congratulations to the two doctors. It seems that the vitality potion and anti-aging serum have been successfully developed. Lancelot was not surprised at all, he just looked at the group of scientists in front of him with a smile on his face. On the road of evolution, Mutant has gone a long way, but this group of scientists can help Mutant go further. Science, in the long-term civilization of the Earth, is it not a genetic mutation, a variant civilization? Long ago, the House of Mutant Evolution conquered all human diseases except cancer through evolution master Darwin. Then Dr. Leonard started to work on Sabretooth Victor's self-healing factor research, and at the same time Darwin led scientists to conduct extreme compression experiments on cell vitality. Although the time is short now, with all the strength of the scientists of the entire evolution house, 2 medicines suitable for humans and mutants have been developed. Vitality Potion and Anti-Aging Potion. Vitality Agent, also known as Cell Activity Stimulator, is a special factor discovered by Darwin in the process of constantly adapting to evolution. This factor can make the cells of the whole body full of vitality like a stimulant without side effects. When the Vitality Potion was developed, it was directly produced in batches, and then all the people in the Mutant Evolution House were allocated some Vitality Potion. And this group of scientists often took this Vitality Potion as a meal. When they felt tired, they immediately injected a Vitality Potion, and then continued to devote themselves to research work. It is also because of this that the bioengineering of the House of Evolution is rapidly improving at an exponential rate. My lord, you and your mutant comrades are the lighthouses of biological evolution. We have only achieved some results by relying on the guidance of the lighthouses. Dr. Leonard looked at Lancelot enthusiastically, and said from the bottom of his heart. Only after entering the House of Mutant Evolution, Dr. Leonard finally knew what mutant really meant. As Lancelot once said, mutant is a guiding beacon on the path of human evolution, a great explorer, and a great leader. Let's go, take me to see how my mutant comrades are doing now. Lancelot waved his hand, and then ordered. Yes, my king. Dr. Leonard and Dr. Graham nodded, and then ordered the scientists behind them to prepare a super luxurious car for Lancelot. Mutant, as a symbol of mutation and glory, needs to live in the inner city of the base according to Lancelot's regulations. Humans live in the outer city of the base. Definitely, those humans who have made great contributions to the base can also live in the inner city, just like the group of scientists in front of them. 10 minutes later, Lancelot and the others stopped at a huge amount of experimental building in the inner city. This is the center of the entire base, and there are agents from the House of Evolution stationed inside and outside the experimental building. Entering the experimental building, some scientists were conducting some seemingly complicated experiments, but Lancelot didn't stop to watch. He went directly to the top floor of the experimental building under the leadership of Dr. Leonard. After entering the top floor, Dr. Leonard led Lancelot to several huge amounts of liquid tanks. These metal grooves are filled with a green solution, and mutants with dissimulated bodies are soaking in the solution. First of all, Mr. Matthew Harlan, he is the most enthusiastic about injecting mutant growth hormone. Dr. Leonard walked to a metal groove, and introduced it with some excitement. As early as a few days ago, after Lancelot ordered to inject mutant growth hormones into the previously recruited alienated mutants, Dr. Leonard has been busy with this matter. In order to prevent accidents, and to record the experimental data of various body mutations and alienation, and therefore after obtaining the consent of these people, Dr. Leonard placed all the mutants injected with growth hormone in the metal groove. The process of awakening is recorded by special experimental instruments. Laugh. Dr. Leonard pressed a button, the metal groove opened, and the original solution faded away like a tide. The mutant toad in it stretched his waist as if waking up from hibernation, and then jumped out of the metal groove with both hands. My king. At this moment, Toad's head has completely returned to normal, just like a normal person, and there is no such sticky, heavy mountain feeling on his body anymore, and he feels very relaxed. Toad spanned a distance of 5 meters with just one jump. He knelt in front of Lancelot on one knee, looking at Lancelot with fanatical and reverent eyes, as if he was looking at a god. Matthew, my mutant comrade, show me your ability. Lancelot glanced at Toadman Matthew Harlan, and ordered. Yes, my king. Toadman Matthew responded, and then he fell to the ground on all fours. His whole body began to inflate as if inflated. In just a few seconds, a giant toad more than 3 meters high appeared in Lancelot in front of. Huge and wide mouth, strong jaw and teeth, extremely hard and strong skull, covered with jagged carapaces all over the body, the huge body crouched on the ground, like a colossus. My lord, this is my awakening state, and I call it the devil frog. The giant toad opened its mouth and made a wide sound. The sound was like a frog's cry, and it was like a muffled drum. Siberia Base, Number 2 Mutant Evolution House. Since the Toadman Matthew Harlan completed awakening, there have been some mutant awakening with body alienation one after another. Among them is the mutant gray silk with strange patterns all over the body. After the injection of the mutant growth hormone, a pair of huge amounts of butterfly wings grew on the back of this Caucasian girl, and the original patterns were also automatically transferred to the above the wings. And her variant awakening state is to incarnate a butterfly with huge amounts of 2 meters. By flapping her wings, she can produce butterfly scale powder, which has some kind of hallucinogenic properties. The other mutant Clementine with cat eyes grew cat ears and claws after being injected with the mutant growth hormone, and her awakening state also became a black adult file size cat. Mutant Jack Yorkton, who has always had an extraordinary fanatical recognition of the mutant glory theory, is even more special after being injected with the medicine. The yellow scales that could only cover the face are all over the body, and he originally only had one. Michi's body soared to 2.7 meters, and his originally fair skin also turned blue. The combination of blue skin and yellow scales made his body sparkling, with an aesthetic feeling unique to the deep sea. Jack Yorkton has changed from a human to a murloc similar to Pirate World, and his strength and speed have all been greatly improved. The only regret is that he does not have an awakening state. It seems that this is what he looks like after the alienation gene is fully effective. It has to be said that when Jack Yorkton metamorphosis became a murloc, the scientists in the entire family of evolution became a sensation. For scientists, Jack Yorkton's murloc form just filled a gap in the scientific world. If humans don't leave the ocean, will they eventually evolve into murlocs? Even Lancelot couldn't help appearing in front of Jack Yorkton and gave him some encouragement and praise. My lord, Jack's experimental data is out. Inside Lancelot's room, Mystique Raven walked over with a copy of the experimental data, and said with a chuckle. Lancelot took the experimental data in Raven's hands casually, and his eyes were shining like rubies. The strength, speed, and resilience are all 6 times that of human beings. If the scientists who study super soldier serum find out, they will go crazy. Lancelot looked at the experimental data in his hand playfully, then turned to face Raven looked over. Raven, how is the situation at Hellfire? Lancelot was more concerned about the situation at Hellfire Club than Murloc Jack's experimental data. The first decisive battle of Mutant is getting closer and closer. Hai Wang Xiao of Hellfire Club is still flying around the world, avoiding Professor X's telepathy while continuing his nuclear explosion career. He Huang Xiao had long forgotten White Queen Emma, and it never occurred to him that Professor X and Magneto would not be free to look for He Huang Xiao now. The Cold War between the two superpowers is on the verge of breaking out. All kinds of warships and nuclear submarines have been deployed in the waters around Cuba at this moment, and they are gradually moving closer to Cuba. Haiwang Xiao also began to absorb the dissipated nuclear energy inside the nuclear submarine he snatched again, making himself stronger. And the Red Devil Asazuo and the Rapids are inseparable from Haiwang Xiao, like guards, always guarding Haiwang Xiao's side. Even just 3 days ago, Black Emperor Xiao relied on his own planning to finally meet General Maxim Ivanov, a powerful figure in the Soviet Union, and reached a pre-war alliance agreement with this general. And Haiwang Xiao never imagined that the so-called General Maxim he saw was his mutant compatriot Mystique Raven. Speaking of which, our mutant comrade, Haiwang Xiao is really a crazy mutant. Mystique Raven thought of facing the 3 comrades of Hellfire Club for the first time, and listened to Haiwang Xiao's eloquent talk about the new era of nuclear explosions. She couldn't help laughing a little. Even she, the mutant, couldn't help but sigh at the madness of Haiwang Xiao. Yeah, the loss of White Queen Emma's telepathy made Haiwang Xiao a little restless, and it also made Haiwang Xiao lose himself. Lancelot took out a document from the table again. This document was Hellfire Club. The Red Devil Asazo was sent to the KGB base. It records all the plans of Haiwang Xiao in detail, as well as the tentative time to start the ultimate nuclear explosion, 3 days later. In 3 days, Raven, go and tell Black Emperor Xiao that the time he made was too hasty, and he postponed the plan to half a month later. Lancelot handed the document to Raven, and Raven immediately understood, nodded. I see, my king. I will let them postpone the plan. But, before you do it again, please let me serve you. Mystique Raven showed a smile on his face, and the whole person instantly transformed into a very beautiful beauty. Impressively, it looks like Black Widow Claire, and her figure is even more exaggerated than Black Widow. Raven, that's why I like you. Lancelot had a smile on his face, and then stepped forward to hug the stunner in front of him. While Lancelot and Raven were playing poker, 100 meters underwater in the high seas, a nuclear submarine was quietly moored, and inside the submarine, Black Emperor Xiao, Red Devil Asazo, Rapids, and Dragonfly Girl Salvador were all frowning at this moment. Azazuo, are you saying that you haven't found Professor X and Magneto? Black Emperor Xiao was wearing a spiritual defense helmet at the moment, and looked at the Red Devil Asazuo standing in front of him with a little irritability. Since losing White Queen Emma, Black Emperor Xiao has been keeping that somewhat ugly helmet on his head. Even when he is sleeping, he dare not take it off. He once fought against Professor X and Magneto for a short time. Haiwang Xiao didn't care about Magneto's ability. No matter how powerful Magneto was, it was all cultivated by Haiwang Xiao, still as weak and pitiful as when he was a child. What really makes Black Emperor Xiao afraid is the spiritual power of Professor X, which is a powerful power that White Queen Emma has never possessed. In the face of Professor X's huge spiritual power, even Emma can only temporarily avoid the edge. It is a psychic power that can easily erase the consciousness of others. This kind of power made Haiwang Xiao dare not face Professor X alone without any protective measures. Even with the passage of time, Professor X has become a heart problem for Haiwang Xiao. He desperately wants to find the positions of Professor X and Magneto, and then go directly to the door and forcibly kill Professor X. However, what made Haiwang Xiao restless was that Professor X and Magneto seemed to have evaporated from the world, and no matter how hard they searched, they could not be found. How's the situation at Maxim's side? Black Emperor Xiao asked the Red Devil Azazuo again. The Red Devil is the only mutant of the 5th level space system. As long as it is an area where the Earth exists, he can reach it in an instant, and the Phantom John, even if it spans a small half of the Earth, is extremely reluctant. Therefore, the Red Devil Asazuo became the right-hand man of the Black Emperor Xiao. I have already sent our plan to the KGB base, but I haven't received a response yet. The Red Devil Asazuo shook his head. The complicated and religious patterns on his red skin made him look like a real devil. Phew, I see. I will continue to absorb nuclear energy for the next few days. I will leave this place to you. Once Maxim agrees to our plan, we will act immediately. Haiwang Xiao opened a dark room and left go in, and the metal door closes. He wants to accumulate strength, and he wants to take advantage of the last moment of civilization to absorb as much power as possible, so that his mutant new future after the nuclear explosion can still become the Black Emperor and surpass Mutant. My lord, I'll take my leave first. In Lancelot's office, Mystique Raven, who had ended his poker career, smiled sweetly at Lancelot and then left the room. What a stunner. Lancelot's face is full of smiles. As Mystique, Raven can simulate any female body, and what makes Lancelot most satisfied is that Raven is always changing his appearance and body constantly. Thousands of faces, let Lancelot linger. Phew, my body can't take it anymore. The body of a normal person really can't satisfy me now. Lancelot let out a slight breath, and couldn't help but said with a wry smile. It is imminent to solve my weak body. Fortunately, there are still 20 days until the lucky draw for God-level pupil art. I hope this time the lucky draw can change my frail body. Lancelot couldn't help but said hopefully. Unknowingly, Lancelot has been in the Marvel world for almost 3 months, and the God-level pupil lottery system will conduct a pupil lottery draw every 3 months. Ever since getting Gios, Lancelot has been looking forward to what pupil spell he will get in the second draw. According to the prompt of the system, even if it is a secondary lottery, the drawn pupils will still exceed Lancelot's imagination. In this Marvel world without pupil techniques, there are many secondary pupil techniques, which can also be called God-level pupil techniques. Lancelot is looking forward to this very much. John. Lancelot straightened his clothes, then tapped the table lightly. Boom. A phantom appeared in front of Lancelot, and then Phantom John took off his western cowboy hat, bowed slightly, and waited for Lancelot's order. Take me to the CIA headquarters. Lancelot stood up, put his right hand on the Phantom John's shoulder, and ordered. Yes, my king. Phantom John nodded to Lancelot, and then disappeared into the office with Lancelot. United States, Virginia, CIA headquarters. Bradley was sitting leisurely on a luxurious sofa at the moment, surrounded by monitor screens. Beside Bradley, there are several CIA staff responsible for sorting out information, and they all look at Bradley respectfully at this moment. Mr. Bradley, please also pass this information on to Field Agent Johnson. A young and beautiful female agent looked at Bradley adoringly at the moment, and then handed a document to Bradley respectfully. In front of Ledley. Okay. Bradley glanced at the document, and then pressed his right hand on his temple. Far away in the CIA safe house in Las Vegas, the fax machine in the room was completely unplugged and started to work, and then an encrypted file was sent out. After the documents were sent out, Agent Johnson, who had been staying in the safe house, took the documents and left here directly. Done. Bradley put down his right hand and snapped his fingers easily. At this moment, Bradley just feels like a fish in water. As a mutant, he has the ability to control any electronic device through his mind. This kind of mind manipulation is not a psychic power like Professor X, in fact, according to the research of scientists at the Mutant Evolution House. When Bradley released the ability, his thoughts would turn into a special electronic pulse command. At this time, Bradley's brain completely became a huge signal tower, an intelligent control center. It is also because of this that Bradley can control any electronic device just by relying on what he thinks in his heart, and this electronic pulse has stable energy fluctuations. Bradley can use the electronic pulse released by his thoughts to give power some unpowered devices. It is also because of Bradley's power that Lancelot sent him here to constantly exercise his mutant ability with various electronic equipment from the CIA. Pong. Just when Bradley was about to show off to the girl beside him, a phantom appeared in this room. Then Lancelot walked out of the phantom, and the Phantom John disappeared in a teleport again. My king. Bradley immediately stood up from his seat after seeing who was coming, and then stood respectfully in front of Lancelot. Bradley, how do you feel? Lancelot glanced at Bradley and asked. Lancelot has some expectations for Bradley. In Lancelot's view, Bradley's variant ability still has a lot of room for development. He wants to train Bradley into Ultron. Even if he can't reach the level of Ultron, he must reach the level of JARVIS created by Tony Stark. It is only 1962, the internet has not yet become popular, and there is still plenty of time left for Bradley to grow up. My lord, I feel great. Through the CIA's control system, I feel that my mind can extend far. Lancelot said excitedly. As long as it is an electronic device, whether it is a household appliance, a lamp, a pager, a telephone, or a military device, an encrypted satellite phone, the internet, a computer, or even a medical device, etc., he can control it. Moreover, as long as these electronic devices are in the same central control system, Bradley can override his thoughts. Very good, Bradley. Lancelot nodded. In fact, it was the current era that limited Bradley's performance. If it is the modern age of the 21st century, the mobile internet has almost become globalized and family-oriented. I believe that Bradley's mutant level will also become a level 4 or even a level 5 mutant. However, Professor X's brainwave strengthening machine may be able to enhance Bradley's mind control area. Lancelot looked at Bradley, and inevitably thought of Professor X's brainwave strengthening machine. Moreover, the brainwave strengthening device is also an electronic device. In theory, Bradley can control it through his mind. Bradley, turn on the surveillance video of Xavier Manor. Lancelot came back to his senses, ordered casually, and then sat on the sofa. After receiving Lancelot's order, Bradley pressed his right hand on his temple again, and manipulated a projector to project the monitoring screen of Xavier Manor onto a huge curtain. Maybe even Professor X doesn't know that hundreds of pinhole cameras have already been buried by CIA agents in his home. This was before Lancelot took control of the CIA headquarters, and Humferson had already ordered the agent to go to the Xavier Manor to make some arrangements. As expected of Beast Hank, he has built a brain-wave strengthening device again. Lancelot was sitting on the sofa at the moment, gazing at the picture in front of him leisurely. In the picture is a manor with huge amounts of. The manor occupies a huge area. The former Professor X's parents are well-known super-rich in New York, and their Xavier family is a former British aristocrat. However, times have changed. With the end of World War II, Professor X's parents passed away one after another, leaving only this luxurious manor and a huge inheritance for Professor X. Yes, the famous Professor X is a super-rich. This is also one of the reasons why Professor X has always been unwilling to be an enemy of human beings. Professor X can be said to have grown up with a golden spoon in his mouth, and even the inheritance left by his parents is enough for him to spend 2 lifetimes. He has never experienced after seeing the hardships of the people. It is impossible to understand the dire straits of the mutants at the bottom. Lancelot looked at the huge manor in front of him with complicated eyes. Compared with his number 1 evolution home, the manor in front of him was not far behind. The Xavier Manor is really too big. In the center of the manor is a majestic building like a medieval castle. On both sides of the castle, there are rows of buildings. The buildings are like wings, guarding the castle in the center. At this moment Lancelot is setting his eyes on the garden behind the castle. In the center of the garden is a hemispherical receiver with huge amounts of it, which is slowly rotating at this moment. Brainwave strengthening machine. Next to the brainwave strengthening machine, Professor X and Magneto are fine-tuning the direction of the brainwave strengthening machine according to Hank's instructions. Charles, can they really grow into qualified fighters? Magneto opened his right hand at the moment and asked seriously while adjusting the direction of the brainwave strengthening machine. Definitely, Eric, I have great confidence in them. Professor X shrugged, and then reached out and pinched the bridge of his nose. 4 days have passed since he met Sabretooth and fled back to Xavier Manor in embarrassment. During these 4 days, Professor X spent 3 days adjusting his mental strength and brain, and he finally recovered completely yesterday. Come over. And his good friend Magneto is also in the same situation as him. He was injured in the battle with Sabretooth Victor, who was in a state of rampage. He was lying in the hospital for 4 days and has not recovered until now. Come on, Eric. You should also improve your ability. Professor X glanced at Magneto, and had to say that the battle with Victor Sabretooth made them all realize their own shortcomings. Especially when Victor turned into a 5-meter giant Sabretooth, the feeling of oppression made the two of them almost unable to return. So, learn from the pain. The first thing Professor X did when he came back was to formulate the X-Men training plan. He provided a complete set of training plans according to each variant ability. Now these X-Men have been training for 4 days, and everyone has made some progress. Now, it's time to train Magneto. Concentrate, forget the hatred, and recall the most peaceful moment in your heart. Professor X followed the persuasion and used the power of the mind to enter Magneto's brain. And as Wong Ping calmed down, Magneto's power to manipulate metal also increased geometrically, and he opened his right hand, aiming at another huge amounts of windmill in the distance. As time went by, the windmill, which was originally motionless, began to turn slowly under the control of Magneto, and then turned faster and faster, until the blades of the windmill were no longer visible. I made it, Charles. I made it. Magneto clenched his right hand excitedly. Far away from him, the flying car that was spinning rapidly stopped suddenly. At this moment, Magneto felt that if he met Sabretooth Victor again, he would definitely not be as embarrassed as before. And Professor X has come to the X-Men at this moment. Looking at the X-Men in front of him, Professor X nodded to Beast Hank. He has been adjusting his brain for the past few days, and the training of the X-Men has been completed with the help of Hank. Even the equipment worn by the X-Men was developed by Hank. Professor X looked at the Siren Sean Cassidy, who was standing in the first place. The Siren Sean in front of him was wearing a set of hang glider. Hands can reach in. Kraken, let's test your training results in the past few days. Professor X glanced at Sean the Kraken, and then reminded him. Okay, Professor. Siren Sean was already eager to try, and he quickly reached the top of the castle, more than 40 meters above the ground. The siren attacks. Sean the Siren made a gesture towards Professor X and the others below, and then let out a strange cry, with a sharp sound wave from his mouth, and his whole body jumped directly. The sound waves were transmitted to the ground layer by layer, and the sea monster turned and moved in the sky relying on the sound waves, screaming excitedly. And Professor X glanced at Sean the Siren in the sky with satisfaction, and then looked at Shockwave Alex Summers. At this moment, Alex is wearing a special disc device on his chest, which can concentrate the energy rays in his body on his chest. Boom! Shockwave Alex clenched his hands tightly, a ball of dazzling red light emerged from his body, and then a beam of huge amounts of red energy rubbed Professor X's scalp and hit a big tree behind Professor X. Under the bombardment of the energy beam, the big tree was instantly shattered into pieces, and then the whole tree began to burn violently. Hank, it's your turn. Professor X looked at Beast Hank, but at the moment Hank was showing a little resistance. Obviously, he still can't identify himself as a mutant. However, compared to the conflict in the original plot, Hank is no longer conflicted about his identity after being exposed to the theory of mutant glory expounded by Lancelot. Sorry, Professor, I'm not ready yet. After struggling for a moment, Hank McCoy still shook his head. After all, he couldn't convince himself that he was going to inject the mutant inhibitor when he went back. Okay, Hank, follow your inner choice. Professor X just looked at Hank with some helplessness, stretched out his hand and patted Hank on the shoulder, and then turned his head to look at the last X-Men. Logan, are you still adapting here? Professor X asked Wolverine Logan with a gentle face. I'm fine here, Professor. Wolverine Logan, smoking a cigar, glanced down at Professor X before replying. At this moment, Wolverine Logan is wearing an X-Men combat uniform. Compared with Kraken and others, she wants to be a qualified X-Men. Logan, I hope you can forgive me in the future. Professor X's eyes flashed with guilt, but then he adjusted. Let's go see what Miss Mora is up to. Professor X turned around and left the training ground with Wolverine Logan. Wolverine Logan didn't need a training camp. The reason why he stayed with these little kids these days was just to relieve the fact that he was defeated by his mutant brother Sabretooth Victor. Compared to saving the world, Wolverine Logan's greater wish is to become stronger, at least to catch up with his mutant brother Victor. Bradley, keep monitoring the X-Men. They should be training for a long time. Lancelot stood up from the sofa, gave Bradley a brief instruction, and then left the room. Now the first battle of Mutant has entered the final preparations for the decisive battle. Lancelot has already seen the strength of the X-Men, and it will take at least half a month to form a fighting force. If it wasn't for Lancelot's secret plan to suppress the Hellfire Club, I'm afraid this group of X-Men would be forced to go to the battlefield tomorrow, and then they would be easily killed by the Black King Shao. However, the only thing that surprised me was that Professor X finally learned to hide. Lancelot sighed a little. After the life and death crisis before, this young Professor X finally knew that there are people beyond people, and there is a sky beyond the sky. He is no longer blindly arrogant, and has even begun to learn to hide. According to what Bradley monitored, after Professor X and Magneto returned to Xavier Manor, they used their psychic power to cover the entire manor. Anyone who sees the Xavier Manor will subconsciously ignore its existence, forget their original purpose, and walk away from here uncontrollably. It is also because of this that the Xavier Manor is clearly located here, but the Red Devil Asazo has been back and forth more than 10 times in the past few days, but he still has not found the appearance of the Xavier Manor. Perhaps, I should also build such a spiritual protection field. Lancelot's ruby eyes shone with a deep brilliance. At present, the Mutant Evolution House is tackling the evolution of the biological body. It seems that it is time to put the evolution of the mind on the agenda. John, take me to House of Evolution No. 1. After Lancelot walked out of the room, he whistled softly, and the Phantom John suddenly appeared in front of Lancelot. Pong. After Phantom John appeared, he bowed to Lancelot, and then brought Lancelot to the number 1 Mutant Evolution House in Virginia. In the entire House of Evolution, thousands of scientists are conducting their own experiments in the laboratory at this moment, and Darwin's female assistant, Rena, is also wearing a scientific white coat at this moment, and is looking at the experimental platform in front of her intently. Lancelot didn't disturb the experiment of Rena and others, he just walked to the observation window and looked at the experiment platform. On the test bench was a strong white man. At this moment, the man was lying on the bench a little nervously and excitedly, staring at the experimental equipment in front of him. This man is called Isaac Monroe. He is an ordinary human being. He originally had a perfect family, but a year ago he suffered from leukemia. In this era, leukemia is synonymous with death. And to make matters worse, Isaac Monroe did not purchase medical insurance in order to save money, which meant that Isaac had to pay huge medical diagnosis fees. He really couldn't afford it. In order not to drag his family down, he left without saying goodbye and became a homeless man. For a year, he was constantly suffering from leukemia, and his body was getting thinner and thinner. Just when he was about to wait for death in despair, he was found by a group of mysterious organizations. This group of organizations called themselves the House of Evolution, a scientific research organization that helped humans step into evolution. Now this organization needs some people to conduct human experiments, and they chose themselves. Isaac doesn't care about mysterious organizations, the House of Evolution, etc. For ordinary people, even the most notorious Hydra organization is very far away from them. What really moved Isaac's heart was that the organization said that he had the ability to heal him. He didn't want to die, so he agreed. After that, he was taken to a mysterious base, and after being given a simple injection, he was taken to a room to recuperate by himself. Since Isaac was injected with a light yellow liquid, he felt as if his body had been reborn, and he felt that his body was recovering rapidly. 3 days later, Isaac has become like a normal person. In just 3 days, his terminal illness was cured, which made Isaac full of shock and interest in this mysterious organization called Evolution House. In the next few days, Isaac discovered that he could walk around the living area at will, which allowed him to see many creatures that he couldn't even imagine. There are mice that can live in water. Cat with wings. A fish swimming constantly within the sand. There are even puffer fish that float in the air like balloons. A puppy with metallic skin. At this moment, Isaac Monroe felt as if he had entered a fantasy zoo, and everything in front of him made him feel unbelievable. Mutation and glory. Just as Isaac fell into shock, a black man in a scientific white coat walked over beside him. Can blacks still become scientists? Looking at the black scientists in front of him, Isaac Monroe frowned slightly. This era is the most serious moment of racism. It's really a bad white supremacist. The black scientist snorted coldly. As the assistant of the scientist Rena, he was going to eat, but he was ridiculed by the guy in front of him. He decided to give this person nothing. An experimental subject who understands a lesson that will never be forgotten. The black scientist took out a light golden box from his pocket. He gently opened the box, and began to choose a suitable injection. Skin metallization. This potion is not stable yet, pass. It doesn't work if you turn it into rock, and the bones in your body will also turn into rock. Growing wings from a body. Flashy. Why did Master Darwin adapt to so many evolutionary methods? Isaac Monroe looked at the black scientist in front of him with some doubts and muttered for a long time before taking out a shining syringe from the pale golden box, and then under Isaac's blank gaze, the black scientist injected the syringe into his right arm. Base. Following the injection of the syringe, the veins on the black scientist's arm exploded, and then 3 bone claws popped out from the back of his hand. Mommy fuck. Isaac looked at the scene in front of him in horror, and felt as if he was dreaming for a while. Pissed. Without any explanation, the black scientist pierced the bone claw of his right hand into Isaac Monroe's chest. Isaac only felt a sharp pain in his chest, and then fell into a coma. This is a lesson for you. Remember, this is the home of evolution. As a human being, you must always remain humble, because there will always be races greater than us here that are forging ahead and helping us evolve. Oh, by the way, when you wake up, learn about the variant glory theory of the Great King. Before he fell into a coma, Isaac Monroe heard the indifferent words of admonition from the black scientist, and at the same time he felt that something was being injected into his right arm. The effect of the quick healing potion is stronger. It's just that the lasting effect of the mutant serum is too short, it can only last for 1 minute. After the black scientist injected the quick healing potion into Isaac, he began to take out his portable experiment notebook and began to record everything here. Mutation and glory. Once terminally ill, homeless, white supremacist racist, Isaac Monroe transformed. Ever since he was taught by that black scientist, Isaac has changed. Taking advantage of the few days before the experiment on the experimental body, Isaac began to study the theory of variant evolution in the library of the living area. With the deepening of his studies, Isaac had a clear concept of mutant glory and mutant evolution. Especially after seeing that ordinary humans can also become Supermans, defeating illness, aging, and even death. Isaac Monroe, a former white supremacist, became a fanatical proponent of mutant evolution. In the past few days, he has been frantically learning about mutations and the glorious theory of evolution of mutations, and he can't wait to join the human experiment. Glory and evolution. Isaac Monroe, who was lying on the experimental table, came back from his own thoughts, and he shouted frantically, and the originally nervous mood calmed down. Dr. Reyna, let's get started. In front of the test bench, a scientist assistant reminded Rena, who was wearing a scientific white coat. My king hail. This is the first time Reyna presides over a scientific experiment, and it is such an important human experiment. There was also a hint of apprehension in her eyes, but then the shadow of Lancelot appeared in her mind, as well as the voice and smile of her mentor, Evolution Master Dr. Darwin. Dr. Reyna took a deep breath, walked directly to the side of the experimental subject Isaac Monroe, and then skillfully began to debug the directed evolution device. Isaac Monroe, tell me your choice, maintain yourself, or choose to evolve. After adjusting the directed evolution device, Dr. Reyna looked at Isaac with a cold gaze, and then asked seriously, Rode. As early as when he became a test subject, Isaac Monroe had already signed an agreement that the House of Evolution would be responsible for treating his terminal illness, and he himself would become the test subject of the House of Evolution. Isaac Monroe has only one chance to choose. If he maintains himself and ends up becoming an experimental subject, the price is to be erased from the memory here and thrown out of here. From then on, he will never have a chance with the House of Evolution. Once you choose to continue to evolve, it means that Isaac agrees to the experiment, and Isaac will receive the friendship and honor of the family of evolution. Evolve the future. Mutation and glory. Seeing Dr. Reyna's serious expression, Isaac was silent for a moment, then raised his arms and shouted. No one is willing to be ordinary, and no one is willing to be mediocre. I choose to evolve. Isaac's firm words won the approval of the scientists present, and they spontaneously applauded and cheered for Isaac. In that case, let's enter the directed evolution cabin. Dr. Reyna nodded, and then opened the streamlined training cabin of the directed evolution instrument, allowing Isaac to enter it. Pong. After Isaac entered the training cabin, Dr. Reyna closed the hatch, and skillfully took a Rubik's Cube box full of sci-fi colors from the assistant's hand. Then, Isaac Monroe, choose your direction of evolution. Dr. Reyna held the Rubik's Cube in her hand, and asked again. Underwater breathing, heat resistance in deserts, metallized skin, anaerobic respiration, and ancestral evolution. Dr. Rui Na said the evolutionary directions one by one, and other scientists have long been accustomed to it. Zach Monroe was blown away. Breathing underwater. It didn't take long for Isaac to choose his own evolutionary direction. Since he was a child, Isaac had a deep yearning and fear for the ocean, so he heard that he could breathe underwater. After breathing, he directly made his choice. As you wish, Isaac. Dr. Reyna nodded, then lightly tapped on the Rubik's Cube, took out a light golden evolution serum from it, and injected it into the cultivation cabin. The first evolution experiment has begun. Dr. Reyna's face became serious, and then she directly turned on the evolution serum input and directional incubator of the directional evolution instrument. A group of dazzling golden light rose from the training cabin, and then illuminated the entire laboratory in a magnificent manner. It hurts. An hour later, Isaac Monroe's painful roar came from the training cabin. After hearing Isaac's painful voice, Dr. Reyna frowned slightly, and then looked at the scientists behind him. Inject Isaac with analgesic serum. Dr. Reyna's order was issued, and the scientists immediately got busy. 5 minutes later, the painful expression on Isaac Monroe's face disappeared, and the analgesic serum made him unable to feel the pain in his body at all. 2 hours later, in the training cabin, Isaac Monroe's body wasted away at a speed visible to the naked eye, and soon became skinny. Inject vitality potions and nutrients. Looking at the vital signs of Isaac in front of him, Dr. Reyna calmly ordered. And after Isaac's body was infused with vitality potions and nutrients, he recovered as if inflated again. In the next 4 hours, 2 parotid glands appeared on both sides of Isaac's shoulders, and fish-like alveoli appeared in his lungs. Evolved cells integrate 95%. The experimental subjects have no adverse reactions. Directed evolution integrate 84%. The physical characteristics of the experimental body are good. The parotid gland, the directed evolution organ, is integrated with the cells of the shoulder according to the predetermined plan. The style is beautiful and light. Alveoli that can adjust water gravity appear in the lungs, and the experimental subjects have no adverse reactions so far. The voices of scientists sounded in the laboratory, and as the scientists reported, the serious expression on Dr. Reyna's face gradually relaxed. Evolutionary cells integrate 100%. Directed evolution integrates 100%. Directed evolution organ parotid gland and experimental body perfectly integrate. Our experiment was a success. We created an evolutionary. Dr. Rui Na looked at the data in front of her, and suddenly jumped up excitedly, and she announced loudly with an excited expression. Boom! Following Dr. Reyna's words, the scientists in the entire laboratory were excited, and Lancelot, who had been standing in front of the observation window watching this experiment, couldn't help but smile. You have created history, and the House of Evolution will be honored by your research. Lancelot walked to the center of the laboratory, looked at Dr. Ruina and others with admiration, and praised. My king. After Lancelot appeared, all the scientists stopped cheering, spontaneously stroked their chests with their right hands, and bowed to salute. Dedicate yourself to my king, until you die. All the scientists shouted enthusiastically in unison. Variation in glory, the future will shine because of you. Lancelot nodded, and then looked at Isaac Monroe, the first evolutionary created by the House of Evolution. The first directed evolution experiment of the Mutant Evolution House successfully created the first evolutionary, Isaac Monroe. Lancelot personally tested the data of Iskar Monroe. When Isaac Monroe was in the water, the shoulders would automatically open the 2 parotid glands, and automatically close the lung respiratory system, transforming into the parotid gland respiratory system. Moreover, unlike humans who will be disturbed by the water flow when entering the water, the special alveoli in Isaac Monroe's lungs will open after entering the water. Through the special alveoli, Isaac can adjust his center of gravity in the water as he likes. This allowed him to swim in the water like a fish following the current, adjust his alveoli, lower the gravity, and run on the underwater riverbed with his legs. According to Lancelot's tests, Isaac can run twice as fast underwater as he can run on land. After Isaac left the water, the parotid glands on his shoulders would automatically close, leaving only 3 marks similar to horizontal tattoos on his shoulders. Unless he enters the water again, the other respiratory system in his body will not have any impact on his life. After confirming Isaac's experimental data, Lancelot left the laboratory, and he still had a lot of things to deal with. Dr. Spencer, how is the development of the biological weapon program? Lancelot came to the core experimental area of the House of Evolution and found Dr. Spencer, the person in charge of the weapon research and development program here. Dr. Spencer, originally a cutting-edge weapon research engineer, has been ordered by Lancelot to study some special weapons after he became a scientist in the House of Evolution. My king hail. Dr. Spencer is a handsome middle-aged scientist with blonde hair. His handsome face is full of respect at the moment. After saluting, Dr. Spencer brought Lancelot to the core area of the weapons laboratory, where a group of scientists were debugging several pieces of sci-fi equipment. My lord, this is the steel wing that we cultivated based on Mr. Oren's cells. Dr. Spencer brought Lancelot to a huge amounts of steel wing, and said excitedly. Looking at the smooth wings in front of him, shining with metallic luster, Lancelot nodded slightly, then gently opened his right hand, and pressed on the steel wings. Base. With the touch of Lancelot's right hand, the steel wings seemed to come alive. A pair of wings opened automatically, and metal feathers began to extend from the center. These metal feathers automatically covered Lancelot's back, and then connected with Lancelot's body. The skin is perfectly integrated together. This steel wing also combines the evolutionary adaptation cells of Master Darwin, and has added the characteristics of Mr. Bradley's mind control device. When used, it can be used like an arm and a finger, and can be sent and received at will. Dr. Spencer looked at Lancelot, wearing steel wings, introduced again. Swish. Lancelot concentrated slightly, the huge steel wings behind him spread out, and Lancelot also flew into the air directly. It's not bad. What about the others? Lancelot simply tested it, and then separated the steel wings from his body. The biological weapon plan is not just a piece of steel wing equipment. In fact, Dr. Spencer did not disappoint Lancelot, and he presented 3 special biological weapons to Lancelot again. A potential energy conversion energy gun developed by Gambit Remy's potential energy conversion kinetic energy and explosive variant ability. This energy gun can convert potential energy into kinetic energy, release a red energy beam, and has the characteristic of exploding when it hits an object. The other is a biological variant armor developed by Sabretooth Victor and other animal mutant body mutations. Dr. Spencer named it Beast God General. And the last one is a kind of conscious memory infusion device developed according to the spiritual ability mutants such as White Queen Emma. Through this device, you can instill other people's knowledge into your own brain. Dr. Spencer has already done it after passing the test. A soldier of the family of evolution has all the biological knowledge of a doctor of biology. Other biological weapons programs include teleporter, space teleportation device. The beast god made the biological armor. Let our people test it, and if there are no problems, let's mass produce it. Lancelot inspected the biological weapon plan, and then gave orders to Dr. Spencer. Of order, my king. Dr. Spencer nodded excitedly. He had wanted to test his biological armored beast general for a long time. John, send these pieces of equipment to Raven. Lancelot randomly selected a set of beast generals and a few energy guns, and handed them to the Phantom John behind him. Pong. After taking over the weapon device in Lancelot's hand, Phantom John disappeared here immediately, and Lancelot walked out of the core area of the Evolution House and came to the living area. Because the number 2 House of Evolution requires a large number of people to build, the living area that was originally full of people seems a little deserted. And at the moment in the leisure area of the living area, mutant Silver Fox Carla is looking at the girl who is exercising in front of her with a smile on her face. Carla's sister Anna. At this moment, Anna, with the help of the mutant gene stabilizer, has been able to freely control her mutant ability. Although sometimes it will turn into a stream of water due to emotional agitation, but it will no longer be life-threatening. Sister, what are you thinking? Anna was manipulating the water glass in front of her, and the water in the glass was slowly converging towards her palm, but then she saw the absent-minded Silver Fox Carla. My king. Silver Fox Carla made no secret of her thoughts. Since seeing Lancelot, she has been deeply attracted by Lancelot. It is a kind of kingly temperament, and no woman can refuse this kind of temperament. No woman wants to be queen. However, Silver Fox Carla can only think about it. After all, her figure is not as good as Mystique Raven, and her appearance is not as good as White Queen Emma. With these 2 women around, she has no advantage. However, if it's Anna, with her mutant ability, she must be able to please my king. Silver Fox Carla looked at Anna. Anna also has a beautiful face, and compared to White Queen and Mystique, Anna, who is only 19 years old, looks pure and tender. Moreover, Anna's variant ability is to manipulate water flow, and her body can also be transformed into water flow to a certain extent. Anna, come with me to meet my king. Looking at her younger sister Anna, Silver Fox Carla became more and more satisfied. She grabbed Anna's arm and was about to take Anna to find Lancelot. Carla, do you want to see me? Lancelot looked at the two girls in front of him, then chuckled. My king. X2. Silver Fox Carla and Anna turned around and saw Lancelot immediately, which made their eyes shine, staring at Lancelot enthusiastically, and bowed in salute. Anna, stay with me for now. Lancelot came to the living area, originally for Anna. Anna is the only one of Lancelot's subordinates who has an elemental ability like Iceman and Pyro. As long as Anna can grow up, she will be able to reach the level of a 6th level mutant just like Iceman and Pyroman. Obey, my king. Anna was a little flattered after hearing Lancelot's words. She was stunned for a long time before finally reacting, and hurriedly stood beside Lancelot. Silver Fox Carla, you can manage this base for now. Lancelot glanced at Silver Fox Carla, and then gave a simple order. Yes, my king. Although Silver Fox Carla was a little disappointed, she still responded enthusiastically to Lancelot. In Las Vegas, a stretched Lincoln parked at a private club. The car door opened, and Mystique Raven in the form of Maxim Ivanov stepped down, holding a lockbox in her right hand. As Raven got out of the car, several mutants in suits quickly followed behind Raven. My lord, I'm coming in. Raven, transformed into Maxim, touched his ear after entering the private club. In the CIA headquarters building, Lancelot was sitting on the main seat. Beside him stood the water figure Anna, and in front of him was Bradley, who was using his mind to remotely control electronic equipment. At this moment, Bradley has already controlled the surveillance equipment around Raven through his mind, and projected the surveillance video in front of Lancelot through a projector. Looking at Mystique Raven in the picture, Lancelot showed a smile on his face. The reason why Mystique Raven turned into General Maxim Ivanov this time was to meet the Hellfire Club. Raven, when the time is right, you can disclose the X-Men's special training to Black Emperor Shao. Lancelot tapped the table lightly, and then reminded. Under Bradley's ability, Lancelot can easily transmit his words to the Raven headset in Las Vegas even without a communication device. Okay, my king. After hearing Lancelot's order, Mystique Raven nodded, and then swept his eyes towards the private club. The entire private club was full of dancers. Raven curled his lips slightly, then put on a lewd expression, and walked towards the VIP area ahead. General Maxim, you haven't been here for a long time. Although Raven is now a general of the Soviet Union, he was still warmly welcomed by the dancing girls. And in the core VIP area of the private club, Haiwang Xiao of the Hellfire Club was looking at the monitoring screen in front of him with a serious face. He just glanced at Raven and noticed several people dressed as bodyguards following behind Raven. Mutant. With just one glance, Haiwang Xiao recognized these so-called bodyguards as mutants, and at the same time, Haiwang Xiao also understood why Maxim would agree to come here. Naive, just recruited a few mutants in the Soviet Union, do you feel that you can be confident? Black Emperor Xiao's face was full of ridicule and disdain, although he didn't know what kind of ability the mutants protecting Maxim had, but no matter what kind of ability he has, it's not enough to look at in front of his Hellfire Club. Salvador, go and meet our partner. Haiwang Xiao picked up a glass of red wine, lightly collided with the dragonfly girl Salvador, and then ordered in an unquestionable voice. Yes, Black Emperor. Dragonfly girl Salvatore nodded, and the wings of the dragonfly on her back waved, and she floated into midair, and followed the special passage in this room to the private club. General Maxim, long time no see. However, before Salvatore found his target, a familiar figure had already appeared in front of Raven. You are. Raven showed a hint of doubt just right, but she looked at the blonde girl with outstanding figure in front of her with playful eyes. My lord, it's Agent Mora. Raven turned slightly, clearly reflecting the girl in front of him. It seems that Professor X has also discovered the cooperation between Hellfire Club and the Soviet Union. In the CIA building, Lancelot looked at Agent Mora who was barely dressed in the screen, and a deep smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Raven, take her. Professor X must be nearby too. Lancelot already knew that Professor X was here too after seeing Agent Mora in a dancing girl costume. Remember to open the mind shield on your body. Lancelot ordered again, and under Lancelot's order, Mystique Raven lightly pressed his right hand on his ring, and a ball of mind force field shook Mystique Raven's body coverage throughout. Way. Outside the private club, Professor X, who just wanted to use his psychic power, suddenly felt waves of electromagnetic interference in his brain, which forced him to let go of the idea of manipulating General Maxim. Charles, are you really sure that Hellfire Club's Black Emperor Shao is here? Beside Professor X, Magneto reconfirmed with hatred in his eyes. They seem to be hiding in a special place, and my spiritual power can't detect it, but I have seen Salvatore the Dragonfly Girl. Professor X frowned slightly, and Magneto couldn't calm down every time he met He Wangshao. But this time, when they came to this high-end private club opened by Hellfire Club, they got the news that Black Emperor Shao would secretly cooperate with Soviet high-ranking Maxim Ivanov here. Although I don't know what the content of their cooperation is, Professor X guesses that it is likely to be related to World War III. In any case, Professor X must know the exact information. Moreover, this time it's not just the Hellfire Club, I also found people from the Mutant Evolution House. Professor X's words made Magneto calm down immediately. He looked at Professor X in astonishment, and recalled in his mind shot of being hammered by Sabretooth Victor. The House of Mutant Evolution. How did Lancelot's people appear here? Are they also preparing to start World War III? Also, Charles, what the hell is that Lancelot guy's mutant ability? Magneto's series of questions not only revealed the doubts in his heart, but also the doubts in Professor X's mind. So far, they've only seen Lancelot once in the first place, and in the memories of the X-Men and Sabretooth Victor. They haven't figured out Lancelot's ability at all. Before he knew it, Lancelot became more mysterious and terrifying than He Wangshao. It's an ability that surpasses the power of the mind. In the face of that terrifying power, my mind power seems as small as an ant. A power comparable to that of a god. Professor X inevitably recalled the short confrontation with Lancelot in Sabretooth's memory again. He only saw a pair of flying birds and unrivaled strength. But what this force is, he has no idea. Okay, let's not pay attention to the people in the House of Mutant Evolution. Our primary goal is still the Hellfire Club. Shaking his head slightly, he expelled the fear of Lancelot's power in his mind, and then Professor X's spiritual power overwhelmed him again. The entire private club. General Maxim, the Black Emperor welcomes you. At this moment, Mystique Raven had already seen the Dragonfly Girl Salvatore. Looking at the familiar girl in front of her, a smile appeared on Mystique Raven's face. Let's go, take me to see Sebastian Shaw. A thick and old voice came from Raven's mouth. She stretched out her hand and pulled Agent Mora, who was still courting at the side, and then gave orders arrogantly. Just like the owner here. Inside the CIA building, Lancelot sat on a soft and high-end sofa, watching the video in front of him with great interest. The surrounding of the entire private club has already been incorporated into the same control system by Lancelot's mutant Bradley. Professor X and Magneto didn't even notice that the camera on a street lamp above their heads was silently watching them. Even Lancelot didn't think that he just sent Mystique Raven to meet with He Wangshao from Hellfire Club, and by the way, he got all of He Wangshao's plans. But it never occurred to them that this meeting would turn into a tripartite meeting of the Mutant Big Three. Hellfire Club, home of the X-Men and Lancelot's mutant evolution. Interesting, does this count as the prelude to the first battle of Mutant? Lancelot tapped the table lightly, and murmured expectantly. Raven, be careful, Lancelot reminded, and then watched quietly. This is the first meeting of the Mutant Big Three, and it is very commemorative. At this moment, Mystique Raven, incarnated as General Maxim, is hugging left and right, sitting on the soft sofa in the VIP seat, playing with his hands up and down, having a great time. Behind Raven, there are several silent mutants of the evolutionary family of mutant. Where's Sebastian Shaw? Let him come out to see me. Raven looked up at the time, and then angrily reprimanded Salvatore at the side. At this moment, Raven, after playing General Maxim for a long time, already has a kind of majesty of a superior. Just sitting on the sofa, there is a feeling of not being angry. You guy, how dare you call the Black Emperor by his name? Salvatore, the Dragonfly girl who was standing beside her, was already dissatisfied with Raven. and when she heard that Raven called the Black Emperor by his name, she was a little furious. Just when Dragonfly Girl Salvador wanted to do it directly and teach the human general in front of him a lesson, a puff of red smoke appeared. Amidst the smoke, Black Emperor Shao, Red Devil Azazuo, and Torrent Quest came out. "Stop, Salvador. Don't neglect my honored guest." Black Emperor Shao glanced at Dragonfly Girl Salvador with displeasure. "Yes, Haiwang." Seeing Haiwang Shao's gaze, Salvatore lowered his head in fear. She is very clear that although Haiwang Shao often talks about the mutant family theory, once someone really disobeys his decision, he will absolutely show no mercy. Salvador still remembers that he was slapped flying by He Huangshao because he questioned He Huangshao's plan, and he lay on the bed for 3 days. "General Maxim, long time no see." After reprimanding Salvador, Huangshao smiled gently at Raven with a gentle smile on his face, as if he was an old friend. "Sebastian Shao, put away your hypocritical smile, you lunatic who only knows how to destroy the world." Raven slapped Huangshao's arm open, and said mercilessly. Although the two parties are now in a cooperative relationship, at this moment Raven represents the Soviet Union. Although the Cold War continues, if the Soviet Union is really determined to be a turtle, World War III will never break out. Therefore, in order to carry out his plan smoothly, Black Emperor Shao has always regarded himself as a subordinate of General Maxim. "Hee, General Maxim, you didn't come here this time just to mock me, did you?" The smile on Huangshao's face disappeared. He thought he was the leader of the mutant group, but at the moment Raven ridiculed him like this. The face is dull. However, just as Lancelot expected, although Black Emperor Shao was furious inside, on the surface he still had to make false claims with Raven. "Okay, you all go down." Raven sat on the main seat and waved to the dancers beside him, leaving only Agent Mora. "Shao, tell me about your plan. How will you start a war?" After all the idlers left, only Mutant was left here. Oh, and there was also a human Agent Mora. "As you wish, General Maxim." After hearing Raven's question, Huangshao smiled again. He glanced at the Red Devil Azazuo behind him, and then Azazo turned into a red mist and disappeared. When he reappeared, the Red Devil had already brought a huge amounts of world map. "We are planning to plunder an unmarked ship in Cuba, and then send missiles to the U.S. warship in Cuba, the center of the U.S.-Soviet confrontation." Huangshao picked up a model ship from the map and threw it at the Cold War dividing line between the two superpowers. Raven looked at Huangshao's actions noncommittally. She already had some understanding of Huangshao's plan. It was nothing more than creating chaos on the dividing line of the Cold War, making both sides think that the other side had crossed the line. Either the Soviet Union or the United States will start the war without hesitation. Definitely, if the situation changes, I will let the Red Devil directly sneak into the U.S. nuclear submarine and press the button to launch the nuclear bomb. Huangshao continued to add, obviously, he has already made up his mind about how to provoke a world war. At the same time, I will let the torrent release a tornado on the sea surface, set off a tsunami, and move all the ships of the two sides towards the dividing line. When the ships of the two sides collide together, even if they do not get orders from their superiors, they will do nothing. The War of Hesitation. Black Emperor Shao talked eloquently, and Agent Mora, who had been sitting next to Raven, broke out in a cold sweat, because no matter what it was, Agent Mora found that he was powerless to stop it. In Black Emperor Shao's plan, World War has become an inevitable. If this does not start a nuclear war, then I, Huangshao, will release the power of the nuclear bomb and destroy the American fleet myself. The red light in Huangshao's eyes flickered, and a huge amount of energy followed Huangshao's words burst out violently. The facilities in the entire room are all in a state of slight weightlessness. Is this the power of the Black Emperor Shao? Even the well-informed Raven was a little surprised at the moment. Then Raven took out a document and put it on the table. According to our Soviet high-level meeting, your plan needs to be postponed until 15 days later. Raven's words made Huangshao's face darken. Why, he has been planning this war for a long time. Originally, he thought that he would be able to implement his plan to destroy the world immediately, but now he heard that Raven would delay it by 15 days, which made him unable to restrain himself anymore. Anger. He wanted to show the Soviet general in front of him the true power of Mutant. According to the intelligence of our KGB agent, the US military has a special mutant force, the X-Men. And according to the information we have detected, this X-Men is on alert. As far as I know, this X-Men has only one target, and that is you and your Hellfire Club. In other words, Black Emperor Shao, you are in trouble. Raven gave Haiwang Shao and Agent Mora a meaningful look, then nodded to the mutant of the Mutant Evolution House behind him, Shishirin out of here. X-Men. Black Emperor Shao watched Raven leave with cold eyes, and then couldn't hold back his anger any longer. A ball of red energy shot out from his right hand, and bombarded the wall in front of him. Suddenly a breach appeared in the wall. Don't let that old guy Maxim leave. Haiwang Shao was going to directly control Raven in order to coerce the Soviet military to cooperate with his plan. Eric, I can see Haiwang Shao and the others. Outside the private club, Professor X's pupils shrank slightly, and he found that he could see Haiwang Shao and others with his spiritual power. Do it, Charles. After hearing Professor X's words, Magneto immediately raised his hands, and his whole body rose into the air. Sure enough, both Haiwang Shao and Magneto couldn't hold back anymore. It's just right, I can use this battle to test the strength of my mutant army. Lancelot watched the changes of the X-Men and the Black Emperor Shao in the state of rage, and his ruby-like eyes suddenly became deeper. Las Vegas, in front of the private club of Hellfire Club. Raven, incarnated as General Maxim, came out with a group of fellow mutants, and at the same time, Raven received an order from Lancelot in his ears. Win glory for the House of Evolution. Lancelot issued only one order, but Raven's face turned solemn. She stopped in her tracks, and then turned around to give Lancelot's order to the mutants behind her. Obey, my king hail. The mutants following Raven are all mutants who have just awakened this time, led by Toadman Matthew Harlan and Murloc Jack Yorkton. Paul, you are responsible for escorting Ms. Raven back. Lancelot's eyes sparkled with fiery red birds, and then the eyes of all the Evolution House agents around Mystique Raven turned red. Geos Rampage Mode. In this mode, Lancelot can not only see what these people see, but also use Geos to transmit orders over a long distance. I obey, my king. A tactical team led by Paul immediately responded in a calm tone. In the Geos Rampage mode, all soldiers have the characteristics of absolute reason and no fear of pain. Raven left here under the escort of Paul's team, and when Raven just left, a cloud of red mist appeared on the street, and then the Red Devil of Hellfire Club appeared in midair. Want to leave? The Red Devil Asazo glanced at Raven's vehicle, and then prepared to teleport there. However, before he could teleport, he suddenly saw a swift tongue wrapping around his body. Boom! The tongue suddenly retracted like a spring, and the Red Devil Asazuo was caught off guard and was directly dragged and hit the ground. This way is not going to work. Matthew Harun of Toad looked indifferently at the Red Devil Azazuo on the ground, and then shook his head twice. Basu. Pong. The Red Devil Asazuo suddenly turned into a puff of smoke and disappeared above the ground. When he reappeared, he had already returned to the front of Black Emperor Shao. Let Maxim run away. The Red Devil Asazuo looked a little embarrassed. His forehead had already turned purple. He glanced at Haiwang Shao and then said helplessly, "Run away." Haiwang Shao frowned slightly, but he didn't blame the Red Devil, but nodded slightly. Now, my mutant brothers, let's use your strength to your heart's content. Haiwang Shao had already felt the familiar metal fluctuations, which made Haiwang Shao's face solemn. Facing the Red Devil and the Torrent, the Dragonfly Girl 3 said, "Rumble." And just after Haiwang Shao finished speaking, the entire private club instantly rose from the ground and flew into the air, and on the ground, only the terrified human dancers remained. Get out of here. A vast spiritual power enveloped this place, and the human dancing girl who was originally terrified, as well as the people on the surrounding streets, suddenly dispersed. In just a few minutes, there is only mutant left. Eric, my child, why don't you be polite when you see your teacher? Haiwang Shao looked at Magneto floating in the sky with interest, and said in a low voice. Sebastian Shao. Magneto, who was floating in midair, descended slowly, looked at Haiwang Shao with resentment in his eyes, waved his hands again and again, and pieces of metal quickly spread all over the sky. Go to hell. Magneto tried his best, and the metal above his head fell like a meteor, carrying magnetism and gravity, and swarmed towards Haiwang Shao. Eric, you still haven't learned how to control your mutant ability. You still disappoint me now. Haiwang Xiao crossed his arms and turned a blind eye to the metal fragments that hit him. At this moment, he looked at Magneto with eyes full of disappointment. Rumble. Countless metal fragments fell down like meteors. However, no matter how amazing the momentum of the metal fragments made by Magneto was, after hitting Haiwang Xiao, it was like a mud cow falling into the sea. All the fragments lost their energy and fell on the ground, above the ground. Black Emperor Sebastian Xiao is a real level 5 mutant. Its variant ability, which absorbs and stores energy, is enough to make him immune to all attacks. Whether it is magnetic energy, electrical energy, kinetic energy, potential energy, as long as it is energy, he can absorb it. Magneto's attack, in Haiwang Xiao's view, was just to replenish energy for his body. Eric, come join me, I will develop your ability well. Haiwang Xiao even had time to invite Magneto. Falker, damn it Farker. However, Haiwang Xiao's invitation was met with hysterical abuse from Magneto and an even more terrifying metal storm. It's too weak, it's too weak. Magneto's curse made Haiwang Xiao's face completely gloomy. He raised his right foot, and then slammed on the ground. Rumble. With Haiwang Xiao as the center, a dazzling energy explosion swept out, layer after layer of energy pulses spread out, and the surrounding cars, ground, building ruins, etc., were all reduced to ashes. And Magneto was blown upside down, and his whole body was embedded in an iron plate in the sky. Ahem, cough, is this the power of the Haiwang Xiao? Magneto looked at the Haiwang Xiao standing proudly below him in horror. For a moment, I was terrified. He has imagined the power of Haiwang Xiao as much as possible, but at the moment, he still underestimated Haiwang Xiao. No. After panic, endless anger followed. Magneto's clothes were rattling at this moment, and the ability to control metal exploded with overclocking. Kakaka. The metal buried under the ground began to rise from the ground, and the whole ground rolled like an earth dragon. Countless metals formed huge amounts of metal tentacles, and they grabbed Haiwang Xiao with great momentum. Sure enough, he is a man of the scene. Although Magneto has used his mutant ability extremely, but in terms of the grandeur of the scene, it is still Magneto. At the moment in the CIA building, Lancelot looked at the scene man Magneto and the Black Emperor Xiao in front of him with great interest. Battle. Even Lancelot couldn't help admiring the massive metal tentacles Magneto had created. However, just relying on manipulating metal, it's still a bit unsightly in front of Haiwang Xiao. Shaking his head slightly, Lancelot was more optimistic about Haiwang Xiao than Magneto. Chapter 51. Eric, calm down. In Las Vegas, the original private club has long been turned into ruins, and even the ground is falling apart at this moment. On the ground, huge amounts of metal tentacles were unscrupulously exposed on the street like an octopus monster. The abnormality here obviously attracted many passers-by to watch. If Professor X hadn't urgently used his spiritual power to seal off the street, the US military might appear in front of them within 5 minutes. Professor X wants to calm down Magneto. They are very clear about Haiwang Xiao's ability. The variant ability of energy absorbing makes Haiwang Xiao completely immune to other physical and energy attacks except for the fear of spiritual attacks. However, what responded to Professor X was Magneto's hysterical rants and even more frantic dances of metal tentacles. Go away. Faced with the attack of Magneto's metal tentacles, Haiwang Xiao finally decided to use his full strength. He opened his hands, a ball of red energy in his palm was constantly compressed, and then Haiwang Xiao threw out a red energy ball in his hand like throwing a bowling ball. Boom! After the red energy ball touched the metal tentacles, it exploded with a bang, and a cloud of huge amounts of mushrooms rose up immediately, and a group of red energy shockwaves shattered the metal tentacles in front of it. The entire ground seemed to be washed by missiles, and a huge amount of deep pit appeared. In the deep pit, Magneto was covered in blood. It was obvious that the previous energy explosion left him in a panic. Seeing Magneto soaked in blood, Professor X couldn't sit still anymore. Mind control. Professor X took a deep breath, and his mind power immediately spread out like a tide. Hum. The eyes of the Red Devil Azazuo and Torrent Quest behind Haiwang Xiao suddenly became dull, and the Red Devil Azazuo appeared behind Haiwang Xiao in an instant, and the sharp tail of the inverted triangle stabbed at Haiwang Xiao's neck. HMPH, telepathy. Black Emperor Xiao snorted coldly. turned around and grabbed the Red Devil Azazuo's tail, and lifted the Red Devil Azazuo up with a little force. Boom! Black Emperor Shao casually threw the Red Devil Azazuo into the air, while at the same time he looked at Torrent Quest. At this moment, under the control of Professor X's mind, Torrent Quest is brewing a tornado with each hand. The tornado expands rapidly in his hands, and the surrounding air is stirred by the tornado, and layers of airflow begin to appear. Boom! Black Emperor Shao threw out a ball of red energy shockwave again, and Torrent Quest, who was brewing a tornado, stepped into the footsteps of the Red Devil Azazuo without any resistance. Fax Squid. Magneto's body floated up from the deep pit, and then he waved his hands constantly. A huge amount of metal building in the distance quickly broke away from the ground, and then attacked He Huangshao. Enough! Looking at the huge building falling from the sky, He Huangshao's face was extremely cold, his eyes were full of killing intent, his right fist was clenched tightly, and the nuclear energy in his body was released. Boom! He Huangshao punched out, and the building above his head was instantly enveloped in red energy, and then exploded into powder under the shocked eyes of everyone. Tap, tap, tap. He Huangshao strode towards Magneto. Along the way, he was unstoppable, and Magneto's metal shattered like tofu. At this moment, Magneto, where there is still the previous anger, he seems to recall the fear of being dominated by He Huangshao when he was a child, even if he manipulated the surrounding metal, but when He Huangshao approached, he was constantly pushed by the magnetic force step back. Just as He Huangshao was approaching Magneto, a black shadow rushed out from behind Magneto. Wolverine Logan, wearing an X-Men uniform, roared and ran towards the Black Emperor Shao. Whoosh! Just as He Huangshao looked at the rushing Wolverine Logan with cold eyes, a tongue swept out from a distance and wrapped around Wolverine Logan's paw, and then a black shadow jumped towards him at an extremely fast speed. Variation in glory. Fight for my king. Toadman Matthew Harlan jumped forward like a frog, and at the same time, with a slight force on his head, he directly threw Wolverine Logan into the air. You are Maxim's mutants. The sudden change made He Huangshao stop the action of releasing energy. You are from the evolutionary family of mutant. Even Professor X and others were surprised to see the Toad who suddenly appeared. Quote question mark question mark question mark question mark. House of Evolution. What kind of organization is this? He Huangshao froze for a moment when he heard Professor X's words, his eyes were somewhat puzzled. He has been trying to start the Third World War recently, and he doesn't pay attention to other things. This kind of intelligence matter is usually handled by White Queen Emma. And because of the arrest of White Queen Emma, Black Emperor Shao fell into a situation of information shortage, and because of this, he has never heard of the Mutant Evolution House. Where is Lancelot? What is he going to do? Professor X looked at the eyes of Matthew, a toad man. Inside a pair of ruby-like eyes, a fiery red bird seemed to be fluttering its wings and singing constantly. Gios goes berserk. In such a state, Professor X dare not rashly control Toad and others. Logan, are you sure about dealing with that Toad? Professor X walked to Magneto's side, and then used telepathy to ask Wolverine Logan. Base. Wolverine Logan didn't speak. He stood up, and the bone claws of both hands shot out immediately, and then Wolverine Logan roared, and ran towards the Toad man Matthew. It's too slow. Matthew the Toad blinked his eyes slightly, and Wolverine Logan, who was running wildly in front of him, turned into bursts of slow motion. Looking at the rushing Wolverine Logan, the Toad man Matthew cracked a piercing smile. Awakening. The body of Matthew the Toad began to swell at a speed visible to the naked eye, and then turned into a giant 3-meter-high devil frog. What fuck? Wolverine Logan, who was running, was stunned. He only had time to curse angrily, and then saw the giant devil frog jump more than 10 meters high, and then fell heavily, directly trampling Wolverine Logan on the ground, underfoot. Boom! The huge weight plus the acceleration of gravity made Toad man Matthew step on the ground with huge amounts of toad footprints. And in the center of the pit, Wolverine Logan is bloodied and her bones are shattered. Logan. Professor X's face was solemn. He manipulated the Red Devil Azazer to appear behind Matthew the Toad, and an inverted triangle tail directly pierced Matthew the Toad's chest. Pissed. The triangular tail of the Red Devil Azazo directly penetrated the huge chest of the Toad man Matthew, and at the same time the Red Devil Azazo turned into a red mist and disappeared. The House of Mutant Evolution. Lancelot. On an abandoned street in Las Vegas, He Huangshao, wearing a mind-shielding helmet, was watching the battle in front of him with a look of surprise. I don't know when it started, He Huangshao's Hellfire Club has completely withdrawn from the stage of this mutant battle. The entire Hellfire Club, the Red Devil Azazo and Torrent Quest are all controlled by Professor X's psychic power. Only Hai Huangshao and the Dragonfly Girl Salvador, who just crawled out of the ruins, were left with full fighting power. On the other hand, on Professor X's side, although there are only Magneto and Wolverine Logan, Professor X is enough to control 2 5th-level mutants to fight. Although Magneto is injured, he still has the strength to fight. As for Wolverine Logan, he can even be called a regenerative healing factor, and his combat power has reached the level of a 4th-level mutant. This ebb and flow is enough to completely abuse Hellfire Club's Black Emperor Shao. At this moment, Professor X looked seriously at the Toad Man Matthew, 423, Harlan. After seeing the fiery red birds in Matthew Harlan's eyes, Professor X knew that he could not use his spiritual power to control him. Up. Not only Matthew from Toad, but Professor X glanced to the left, where there were more than a dozen mutants from the evolutionary family at the moment, gearing up and eager to try. Roar! Just as Professor X looked at the mutants in the House of Evolution, the mutants who had been standing still before suddenly let out a loud animal roar. A mutant as strong as a bull, after letting out a roar, immediately turned into a huge bull with a height of 3 meters and 5 meters. Fact, what kind of monsters are the mutants in the House of Evolution? Looking at the huge bull rampaging, Magneto frowned, quickly manipulated the metal with both hands, and lifted him up. At the same time, a metal wall appeared on the bull's rampage, ahead. Boom! The huge bull's head hit the metal wall, and the huge amounts of the metal wall collapsed immediately, and this bull mutant shook his head slightly. The huge amounts of impact made him dizzy. Variation in glory. And this bull mutant is just the beginning, a dozen mutants who have just been awakened and have completely released their power. Puff! A pair of huge amounts of butterfly wings grew out of the mutant girl Gray's back, and then her body turned into a huge 2-meter butterfly. The butterfly flapped its wings and flew into the air quickly, and a piece of scale powder quickly swayed down from the wings. Huh, what's going on? Why do I feel a little dizzy? Wolverine Logan, who was stepped on by Matthew the Toad, was the first to bear the brunt. After inhaling some scale powder, he suddenly felt dizzy, and hallucinations appeared in front of his eyes. Then came Magneto, Black Emperor Shao. The last one is Professor X. Although he possesses huge spiritual power, after inhaling the scale powder, he still inevitably has some hallucinations. And because of these scales, Professor X's control over the Red Devil and Riptide disappeared, and the Red Devil and Riptide regained their normal thinking. The torrent, blow away the scale powder here. Hai Huangshao also saw some phantoms at this moment, which made his face livid, and after seeing the torrent return to normal, he immediately ordered. Torrent Tornado. Between the tornadoes shaking their hands, 2 groups of huge amounts of tornadoes formed, and the tornadoes moved quickly. Wherever they passed, all the scale powder was blown into the sky. Roar! In front of the tornado, another mutant from the House of Evolution began to grow in size, and then turned into a wild boar with a height of 5 meters. The wild boar rushed towards the rapids. The terrifying weight made the ground tremble. Tornado. Facing the oncoming wild boar, Rapid's face was solemn, his whole body began to spin rapidly, and then he turned into a huge tornado and swept towards the wild boar. Boom! The tornado and the running wild boar collided together, and there was a huge impact sound. Under the wild strength of the wild boar, the torrent couldn't even stabilize the output of the tornado. Where did these animal mutants come from? Inside the tornado, Riptide Quest was terrified. He had to overclock his body to create a bigger tornado and fly this giant wild boar. Boom! The Red Devil Azazuo teleported into the sky, trying to catch the huge butterfly in the sky, but then the Red Devil Azazuo discovered that there was actually a person above the huge butterfly. Meow! Mutant Clementine's pupils contracted slightly, and then transformed into a black cat with the size of an adult file, jumping directly from the body of the butterfly girl Grey, and grabbed the body of the Red Devil Azazuo. Boom! The sudden change made the Red Devil Azazuo want to throw the black cat out of his body, but the black cat in front of him is so dexterous, no matter how the Red Devil Azazuo teleports, the black cat will always hang on the body of the Devil Azazuo. Fake. The Red Devil Azazuo cursed angrily, and then teleported to appear in front of Black Emperor Shao. Hai Xiao's eyes were cold, and he patted the black cat with his right hand, and a mass of energy immediately knocked the black cat away, rolling constantly on the ground, and huge amounts of damage appeared on the hair and bones on her body. Hiss, it hurts. The black cat Clementine cried out in pain, and then her whole body lay down on the ground, recovering from the injuries visible to the naked eye. What a terrifying self-healing ability. The three mutants of the Hellfire Club were surprised to see the black cat Clementine's rapid recovery from injuries, and then looked at the giant devil frog, whose injuries had also disappeared. Even Hai Xiao was a little surprised by such a terrifying resilience. Azazuo, let's get out of here. Hai Xiao took a deep look at the mutants of the Evolution House, and he found that compared to the dozen or so powerful mutants who came out of the Evolution House, the Hellfire Club he formed it's just too shabby. Looking at the mutants of the House of Evolution, more than a dozen powerful mutants are obviously mutants of the animal system. Hai Xiao is very clear about what a system of mutant represents. Mutant Legion. This is not a small-scale, more systematic mutant army force like its own Hellfire Club. Hai Xiao once also wanted to command such a mutant army, but he couldn't find a way at all. House of Mutant Evolution, Lancelot. After the World War, you will eventually surrender at my feet. After taking a deep look at the mutant of the House of Evolution, under the power of the Red Devil Azazo, the Black Emperor Shao and the Torrent Quest, Dragonfly Girl Salvador, disappeared in the middle of the street. The mutant of the Hellfire Club is defeated. More than a dozen mutants from the House of Evolution all turned their attention to Professor X and Magneto, each with huge amounts of mutants of the animal system, making the scalps of these two future powerhouses tingle. Let's go to Magneto. Professor X smiled helplessly, and then Magneto waved with both hands, and pieces of metal formed a huge amounts of metal disc. Magneto opened his right hand, and was stepped on by the Toadman. Matthew Wolverine Logan was immediately sucked in. His X-Battle suit is specially inlaid with metal wires inside. Whoosh! In just a few seconds, Magneto and the others also left here. In the entire street, only the Mutant Legion of the House of Evolution remained. Go back, my fellow mutants. Lancelot saw the retreat of Professor X and Hai Xiao through the eyes of the Mutant Legion, and did not order his Mutant Legion to pursue them. The battle this time was just to test the strength of the Mutant Legion of the Evolution House. It has to be said that the strength of Matthew from Toad and others made Lancelot very satisfied. In the Mutant Legion after awakening, the strength of each mutant is at the level of a level 4 mutant. The next step is to wait quietly for the first battle of mutant, and just wait for the second lucky draw. In the CIA building, Lancelot sat in the office belonging to Mr. Humferson and said with a light smile. The previous battle was just a warm-up for mutants' first battle. The real big battle is the next island battle. There are still more than 10 days before the first battle. Lancelot is not in a hurry. Humferson. Lancelot lightly pressed the call button on the desktop, and a minute later, Senator Humferson appeared in Lancelot's office. My king. Senator Humferson bowed respectfully to Lancelot, waiting for further instructions from Lancelot. How's the situation at Raven's side? Lancelot glanced at Senator Humferson, and then asked. Miss Raven is about to return to the CIA under the protection of Paul's team. Senator Humferson replied quickly. Well, you go down first. Lancelot nodded, and when he was about to let Senator Humferson leave, Bradley suddenly broke into the office. My lord, it's an emergency. Bradley's face was serious, and after bowing to Lancelot, he pressed his right hand directly on his temple. Swish! The projector in the room was turned on instantly, and then a picture was presented in front of Lancelot. It was a broad street, and Paul Yulton's team was driving to escort Raven to the CIA building, and then the driving vehicle exploded instantly. Raven, who was in the car, reacted quickly and jumped out of the car, while more than a dozen soldiers of the Evolution House were injured to varying degrees. But before Raven and others could react, they were already surrounded by hundreds of elite soldiers. Bradley, what's the matter? Lancelot's face turned cold. He looked at the image in front of him, and asked in a cold voice. I don't know. This group of people seems to belong to a special department. As for why Ms. Raven's vehicle was intercepted, it is still unclear. Bradley shook his head slightly. Not only Bradley, but even Lancelot was a little puzzled about the source of this elite soldier. He looked at the image in front of him, and the bird in a pair of ruby eyes fluttered out. Virginia, Petersburg, Interstate. Raven is looking solemnly at the mysterious troops in front of him at this moment, and at this moment Raven still maintains the appearance of General Maxim Ivanov. Who are you guys? Although Raven was pointed at by hundreds of soldiers, he didn't show any signs of panic. Compared to when he was facing He Huangshao, facing this group of ordinary soldiers, he didn't have any experience at all. General Maxim Ivanov, we are the Scientific Strategic Corps, please accept our investigation. Under Raven's questioning, a man in a black suit and sunglasses came out and took out a special document to Raven. Science Strategy Corps, isn't this the predecessor of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Beside Raven, a bird appeared in Paul Ulton's pupil. Lancelot uses Gios connection to temporarily occupy Paul Ulton's consciousness. He frowned as he looked at the man who was talking to him. Tell me, all your intelligence information. Lancelot released Gios directly, and in Paul Ulton's eyes, a fiery red bird that only Lancelot could see flew into the man wearing sunglasses. In the eyes of men. Then Lancelot learned all the information about the Science Strategy Corps from this man. The Scientific Strategic Corps is a scientific department established during World War II. During World War II, it was specially used to fight against the Hydra organization. After the end of World War II, the Scientific Strategic Corps was retained and its powers began to expand further. Under the leadership of Peggy Carter, the Science Strategic Corps has become a global organization dedicated to protecting human beings from disasters in just over a decade. Keep the peace. Definitely, the current Scientific Strategic Corps is still restricted by the constraints of various countries and cannot intervene in the internal affairs of each country. What's more, the two superpowers are at the peak of the Cold War, so the Scientific Strategic Corps will not be allowed to develop. However, this situation changed after Professor X blew himself up as a mutant and was informed by the CIA. When the Strategic Science Corps realized that there were mutants in this world, they began to conduct in-depth research and investigation. After several months of investigation, they finally found some cobweb horse traces. General Maxim Ivanov of the Soviet Union was closely associated with Mutant, and it is likely that General Maxim was also replaced by some kind of mutant. Therefore, the Scientific Strategic Corps planned this attack after learning of General Maxim's itinerary. I see. Lancelot looked at the agents and elite soldiers of the Strategic Science Corps in front of him with cold eyes, knowing it in his heart. Kill them. Then Lancelot's gaze became indifferent, and he issued an order directly to the soldiers behind him. Obey, my king. More than 20 soldiers of the Evolution House, their eyes glowed with fanaticism, and then these soldiers pulled out the energy gun newly researched by the Evolution House, and directly pulled the trigger. Boom, boom, boom. Bunches of red energy beams burst out from the muzzle of the gun, and then exploded after hitting the opposite soldier. Mary Falk, the intelligence is wrong, the intelligence is wrong. What weapon is this? Get out of the way, out of the way. The soldiers of the Strategic Science Legion widened their eyes in horror at this moment. Although they were also fighting back with the guns in their hands, the bullets hitting these soldiers were blocked by their special combat uniforms. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, the soldiers of the Evolution House had red eyes flashing. With absolute sanity, they fired every shot. Every time they pulled the trigger of the energy gun, several enemy soldiers would be blown away. 5 minutes later, the constant explosion sound disappeared, and more than 20 people wiped out hundreds of elite fighters of the enemy. My king hail! After the battle, all the soldiers raised their energy guns and shouted frantically. How many people have we lost this time? Lancelot turned his head to glance at the shouting soldiers behind him, and then looked at Raven. Soldiers, and a fellow mutant. Raven's face showed sadness. This time, following her in the car was a fellow mutant who hadn't grown up yet. Because of the sudden explosion, there was no time to escape. Quote, bring the corpses of these warriors to the House of Evolution and give them the highest honor funeral. Quote. Lancelot gave the order solemnly, then closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, his eyes were burning with fire. Strategic Science Corps, well, very good, I haven't paid attention to you yet, you have come to provoke me. Lancelot was a little angry for the first time, because of the surprise attack of the Strategic Science Corps, he lost human soldiers and a fellow mutant. Since your Strategic Science Corps wants war, then I will give you war. Humferson, check out the nearest Strategic Science Corps base. I want them to feel the wrath of my thunder. Lancelot's gaze was as cold as ice. He had been focusing on Professor X and Hai Wang Xiao before, thus ignoring the shield of this era. Obey, my lord. Seeing the anger on Lancelot's face, Senator Humferson quickly issued an order. In just a few hours, the agents of the CIA found a base of the Strategic Science Corps. School of Strategic Sciences, New York. The one who paid the money? No. Lancelot looked at the intelligence document in his hand, with a penetrating smile on the corner of his mouth. Ever since he got the Gios pupil technique, what Lancelot used the most was to make people surrender. He has never shown the true horror of Gios. Just right, I also want to see how far my Gios can go. Lancelot stood up, and the fiery red bird lingered around Lancelot's body, like a phoenix, fluttering its wings. Phantom John, Lancelot ordered coldly. Pong it. A phantom flashed, and Phantom John knelt down on one knee in front of Lancelot. My king, please give me your orders. Phantom John looked at Lancelot enthusiastically, and said a little excitedly. Take me to New York. Lancelot's cold voice made Phantom John shudder. It was the first time he saw his king so angry. Yes, my lord. Phantom John stood up, then grabbed Lancelot's shoulder with his right hand, and disappeared into the CIA headquarters. New York, Blinken Avenue, there is a college with a quiet environment. This academy was secretly established by the Strategic Science Corps, and it is a secret academy for cultivating agents and strategic scientists. At this moment, a young white man was walking out of the academy. Just now, he finally obtained the diploma of this academy and became an agent of the glorious Strategic Science Corps. Drip drip. Just as he walked out of the college, a car honked its horn, and the white man froze for a moment, then walked towards the car. Congratulations, Intern Agent Phil Coulson, congratulations on graduating from the Institute of Strategic Science with excellent academic performance. On the back seat of the vehicle, a black man with a hip-hop afro was looking cynically at the white man in front of him. Nick Fury, 5th level agent, Intern Agent Phil Coulson is reporting to you. The white man is the Marvel novice village chief Phil Coulson, who just graduated from the Institute of Strategic Science. And the black man driving, this is the one-eyed Nick Fury of the future. These two are still just a small 5th level agent, and an intern agent who has just graduated. It will take a long time to grow into an excellent agent in the future. Let's go to the Academy library first. Our officer wants some information. Nick Fury got out of the car, and then brought the 940 ignorant Phil Coulson into the Academy of Strategic Sciences again. Pong. And just after Nick Fury and Phil Coulson entered the Academy, two figures quickly appeared in front of the Academy's gate. My lord, this is the Institute of Strategic Science. Phantom John glanced at the information in his hand, and then said respectfully. John, you wait here. Lancelot glanced coldly at the college gate in front of him, and gave an order to Phantom John. Then Lancelot walked towards the gate of the Academy. Although there were only two people guarding the entire gate of the Academy, these two men were the ace agents of the Strategic Science Corps. Stop, who are you? An agent looked at Lancelot with cold eyes when Lancelot was approaching the gate, and said. Stop breathing. Lancelot just glanced at the agent, and then gave Gios an absolute order. Ho ho ho. Following Lancelot's order, the agent, who was still breathing steadily, stopped breathing for a moment, and his body also collapsed to the ground at the moment he stopped breathing. What's going on? Another agent was shocked at the moment. He looked at the agent BFBJ, covering his neck with his hands, but he couldn't breathe no matter what. This made the agent stunned. Time drew his pistol and aimed it at Lancelot. Suicide. Lancelot just glanced at the agent indifferently, and only said one word. The agent was in a trance for a while, and turned the muzzle of the gun with his right hand, and put it on his temple. Boom! A muffled gunshot sounded, and the agent immediately fell to the ground. His head was directly hit by a bullet with a bloody hole. Lancelot looked down at the corpses under his feet, without the slightest expression in his eyes, and casually stepped over the corpses of these two agents, as if stepping over ants. At this moment, on the square of the entire academy, a group of well-trained agent students pointed their guns at Lancelot, and Lancelot just laughed coldly. Cubs, cannibalism. Lancelot's body was filled with fiery red birds, and the student agent who was originally holding a gun suddenly stared blankly, and then began to shoot randomly around the area around him. Bang bang bang. There were bursts of gunshots one after another, and all the people in the square went crazy, but Lancelot just walked by calmly. He came to the park seat and looked at the two girls in front of him. Hate. Lancelot glanced at the two girls, and the two girls who were still close at first suddenly became like enemies and started to fight crazily. Split into two teams and shoot at each other. Lancelot came to a group of agents again, looked at the group of agents with cold eyes, and gave an order. Bang bang bang. Dozens of agents immediately lined up into two neat teams, and then shot at each other. Dozens of agents fell almost simultaneously. Weird. Monster. Some agents came quickly, and when they saw the chaotic scene of cannibalism around them, they yelled in horror and wanted to pull the trigger. Put down the gun and back away. Lancelot's ruby-like eyes were as bright as stars at the moment. All the agents and scientists who saw Lancelot's eyes all put down their guns involuntarily at this moment and then slowly backed away. You, get in the car, and kill these people. Lancelot turned to look at an agent, and said calmly. And this agent got into the car immediately, and started frantically knocking all the retreating agents away. Lancelot walked into a building with a blank expression, and then clicked in front of a scientist with his right hand. Sleep. The scientist suddenly lost consciousness and fell to the ground straight. Consciousness eliminated. Lancelot placed his right hand on another trainee scientist again and gave the order. Pong. The intern scientist's brain suddenly lost consciousness and became like a sculpture, just standing there in a daze. Pain. Scream. Fear. Lancelot's voice was like the words of God. Each of the agents and scientists, under Lancelot's order, became painful and began to scream, become fear. Several scientists of the Strategic Science Corps looked at the scene in front of them in horror, and screamed in horror for a while. Shut up. Lancelot glanced at the scientists, and then the scientists closed their mouths immediately, and wanted to open their mouths in horror, but found that everything was in vain. Stop breathing. Lancelot walked into the second floor and passed by several agents. These agents suddenly lost their breathing ability, like a fish out of water, opening their mouths frantically, but unable to breathe a single bit of air. Death in peace. Lancelot's words seemed to be God's commandment, and his words could not be followed. In just 10 minutes, there was no longer a living person in the entire Strategic Legion Academy. At this moment, in the library of the Strategic Legion Academy, Nick Fury and Phil Coulson looked at Lancelot, who entered in horror, and fell silent for a while, not daring to speak out at all. Pain. Lancelot glanced lightly at everyone around him, and then everyone started howling crazily. They frantically scratched their own skin with both hands, but the pain that penetrated deep into the bone marrow followed like a shadow, increasing instead of decreasing. I didn't expect to meet two acquaintances here. Lancelot calmly walked in front of Nick Fury and Phil Coulson, and then gave an order for Nick Fury. Tell Peggy Carter that this is just a lesson. If you still want to provoke Mutant, next time it won't just destroy an academy. Lancelot single-handedly bloodbathed the entire Strategic Legion Academy. And, before taking it away, Lancelot surreptitiously ordered a hidden Geass for Nick Fury to follow orders. Even Nick Fury didn't know that he was able to escape because he had already become Lancelot's Geass puppet. Nick Fury led the trembling Phil Coulson to flee in embarrassment, and returned to the Tricurved Wing building of the Strategic Science Corps non-stop, and then reported the situation of the entire Strategic Science Academy to Peggy Carter, who was then director. When hearing that Lancelot suspected to have the ability to speak out, even Peggy Carter, an iron-blooded agent who always followed science, fell silent. Peggy Carter has never been an indecisive person. After learning that Lancelot had bloodbathed the academy she had built with an ability similar to the ability to follow her words, she immediately gave up all research and investigation on Mutant. Even Peggy Carter strictly prohibited all agents of the Strategic Science Corps to enter the silent stage, and no one was allowed to secretly investigate the matter of Mutant. Later, Peggy Carter even sealed up this incident, declaring to the outside world that a chemical leak had occurred in the Institute of Strategic Sciences. A series of actions cannot be said to be indecisive. The entire Strategic Science Corps has re-entered a state of silence. Mutant. Lancelot. At the moment in the chief's office of the Tricurved Wing building, Peggy Carter frowned, tapped the table with her right hand constantly, and then picked up an encrypted phone. I need you, your vacation is over. Peggy Carter said in a serious tone, but there was no response from her encrypted phone for a long time. The future has changed. After Peggy Carter hung up the phone, she fell into deep thought, and then she couldn't help but sighed and murmured with a wry smile. And just after the Strategic Science Corps fell into silence again, Lancelot also returned to his own CIA headquarters. After Lancelot came back, he immediately went to the House of Evolution to attend the luxurious funeral of his subordinates. And Lancelot personally issued an order. The Mutant Evolution House guarantees that every soldier who dies, his family members will have the opportunity to evolve first, and the Evolution House will support their family members so that their families will have no worries for a lifetime. After the funeral, Lancelot returned to his leisurely life. The Strategic Science Corps fell silent, allowing Lancelot to shift his focus to the first battle of Mutant again. Since the previous three-party melee and the House of Mutant Evolution became famous in the first battle, whether it is Hellfire Club's Black Emperor Shao, or the X-Men leaders Professor X and Magneto, there is a sense of crisis and urgency. Therefore, after the battle ended, the two giants of Mutant fell into silence again. Professor X and Magneto began to try their best to teach the X-Men to become familiar with their variant ability as soon as possible. As for Haiwang Shao, he was once again running at the forefront of the war, and began to frequently provoke wars by relying on his own strength. A world war between the two superpowers seemed imminent. Even the President of the United States has begun to make frequent mobilization speeches before the war in the past few days, and Moscow has even deployed millions of troops, preparing for a torrent of steel. The calm before the storm. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye, and Lancelot stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows at the top of the building, overlooking the world under his feet. These 10 or so days were the most peaceful days for Lancelot. "Anna, prepare a quiet room for me." Lancelot turned around and instructed Anna, the private secretary beside him. "Yes, my lord." In 10 days, Anna the waterman was already qualified for the job of a private secretary. On the eve of the first battle of Mutant, Lancelot finally ushered in the second pupil draw. After 3 months, Lancelot is finally about to start the first lucky draw for secondary pupil surgery. System, start the lottery draw. Lancelot was sitting in a special titanium alloy room at the moment, and was already ready for battle. Ding! Congratulations to the host for getting a chance to draw a secondary pupil technique, whether to use it or not. The cold voice of the system is so sweet in Lancelot's mind at this moment. Use. Lancelot didn't waste any time at all, and directly started the lucky draw for pupil surgery. Ding! Start the secondary pupil surgery lottery draw. The lottery draw is in progress. The lottery draw is complete. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the pupil technique, eye-catching. Single quote. The system's lottery draw was over, and Lancelot only felt a slight tingling in his eyes, and then he felt that within his ruby eyes, there was a calendar area that was completely different from the Gios pupil technique. "Are you awake? It's really a sleepy one who came to give you a pillow." Lancelot had an excited smile on his face. Pupil art eye-catching. Although it is only a little-known pupil art, its ability is enough to be called a divine skill in this Marvel world. Eye-catching, from The Interpreter of Megakushi City. Once this anime was all the rage, it tells the wonderful story of a group of teenagers with different abilities. Definitely this anime doesn't matter, what's important is the ability to wake up. Pupil art eye-sighting is the ability to replace a fragile body with an ideal body. That's right, the ideal body. Lancelot, who opened up the eye-catching, finally has the capital to get rid of the weak body of human beings. However, the only thing that makes Lancelot a little regretful is that, although eye-catching, he can replace his body with an ideal body. 0.0. But this replacement should also pay attention to a step-by-step process. Simply put, the current Lancelot cannot reach the sky in one step and directly replace his fragile human body with Thanos' eternal Titan body. The eye-catching ability is, after all, a secondary pupil technique ability. When Lancelot replaces his body for the first time, there will be an ideal threshold. If this threshold is exceeded, the eye-catching ability will not take effect. So, if you want to replace your idealized body, you also need to follow the basic law. Lancelot nodded clearly. Even if there is such a limit as the ideal threshold of eye-catching, its ability can still be called a god-level pupil technique. Then, let's start the replacement now. Lancelot looked down at his frail body, and an excited smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Keep your eyes open. Lancelot's eyes glowed red. Eye-catching ability, activated instantly. Lancelot only felt as if his consciousness had been separated from his body. He lowered his head and looked at his body. Only Lancelot could see countless lines similar to circuit boards, all over his body at this moment. And these lines are constantly extending outward, as if extending from Lancelot's body into the void. And Lancelot was blessed with a heart, and began to think about his ideal body. First of all, add the energy absorption of Black Emperor Shao to your body. Buzz buzz. In the room at this moment, Lancelot's body had already been lying down on the ground at some point, and countless lines like circuit boards emerged from Lancelot's body, and then spread into the void. First of all, add Haiwangshao's energy absorption and release to your ideal body. The figure of Haiwangshao appeared in Lancelot's mind. At the same time, following Lancelot's words, the circuit board-like lines on his body began to shine with golden brilliance. And the lines extending to the void began to converge toward the center at this moment, and a body exuding golden light appeared on the right side of Lancelot, seemingly real or unreal. Countless golden lines began to spread towards the right body, and at the same time, Lancelot felt the power hidden in this new body like one soul and two bodies. Energy absorption and release. Mutant power with the same origin as the Black Emperor and Shao. 970. The ideal threshold has not yet reached the extreme value, and I can still construct other ideal conditions. Lancelot looked down at his two bodies from the perspective of God at this moment, and couldn't help being a little excited. Wolverine's self-healing factor. The golden lines all over the ideal body shone again, and within the ideal body, a second variant, ability, appeared. Wolverine Logan can be called the self-healing factor of regenerative healing factor. Continue. Lancelot felt the state of his ideal body, and the ideal body at this moment still hadn't reached its limit. Mind control by Professor X. The golden pattern flickered for a while, then completely dimmed. Lancelot frowned slightly. His ideal body did not add the spiritual power of Professor X. Did it fail? It's because a 5th-level mutant ability with unlimited potential has already been realized. If you add a second 5th-level ability, it will exceed the ideal threshold. Feeling the eye-catching golden texture information, Lancelot murmured slightly regretfully, stand up. Not only Professor X's mind control, but also Magneto's control magnetic field cannot be added. Similarly, Sabretooth's awakening state cannot be added. And other variants of ability, space ability. Lancelot tried it, and it exceeded the ideal threshold of eye-catching tolerance, while other physical ability Lancelot didn't like it. The more abilities you have, the harder it is to choose. Lancelot smiled wryly. This is the obvious trouble. There are many ideal choices in his mind, but the current ideal threshold is too low, and many of them cannot be realized. Captain America's super soldier physique. After thinking for a moment, Lancelot could only settle for the next best thing, adding Captain America's super soldier body to his ideal body. The golden lines shone again, and Lancelot's ideal body, which was only 1.8 meters, suddenly increased to 1.95 meters. His muscles exploded like Captain America, and he was even more shapely and tangible than a bodybuilder. Wake up and replace. Lancelot took a deep breath. After adding the body of Captain America's super soldier, this time the ideal body finally reached the ideal threshold. Lancelot directly activated the pupil technique Eye Awakening, replacing his original weak human body with an ideal body. Boom! The whole room, as Lancelot activated his eye-catching ability, suddenly became golden and emerald, and the golden lines on his human body shone, and these lines were linked with the golden lines on the ideal body on the right. Afterwards, Lancelot's original body gradually turned into a golden spot of light, which was transmitted to the cause of the ideal body. As time went by, more and more golden light spots poured into Lancelot's ideal body. The original human Lancelot disappeared. Instead, it was a perfect body that gradually opened its eyes. The eyes are like rubies, bright and dazzling, and there are red birds fluttering and singing faintly in them. Is this my ideal body? Lancelot stood up from the ground. At this moment, his body had been replaced by self-awakening and became the ideal body he created. Feeling the vigorous power in his body, Lancelot clenched his right hand slightly, and then punched out. Dull tearing air sounds sounded, and a dent was made on the wall in front of Lancelot, and at the same time, all the shock force was absorbed by the cells in Lancelot's body. Energy absorption and storage of He Huang Shao. Ha ha ha, from now on, I will completely become the master of Mutant. Lancelot couldn't help laughing wildly. This body is a collection of Captain America Steve, Black King Shaw and Wolverine Logan. Just relying on this body, Lancelot is enough to stand on top of this world. Not to mention, this is just the beginning. When Lancelot gets used to this ideal body, he can add ideal settings to his ideal body again through his eyesight. It can be said that Lancelot, who possesses the eye-catching ability, can be like Apocalypse. Every once in a while, he will change into an ideal body, and gather many powerful variant abilities only. And compared to Apocalypse's cumbersome body-changing ceremony, Lancelot's eye-catching is undoubtedly more convenient and purer. He doesn't need to plunder anyone's body or mutant ability, he just needs to imagine his ideal body. God-level pupil technique. Eye-catching ability is undoubtedly a God-level ability. Lancelot couldn't help admiring. The eye-catching ability is enough to make him excited. Lancelot looked down at his body, 1.95 meters tall, with perfect and well-proportioned muscles, even surpassing Captain America Steve Rogers. And this is just the most basic ability. Inside Lancelot's body, the cells are constantly absorbing various tiny energies, and their cell activity will always remain abundant. Scoff. Lancelot casually took out a small knife from his original clothes, and stabbed at his skin forcefully. However, as soon as the tip of the knife touched Lancelot's skin, all the kinetic energy on the knife was absorbed by Lancelot's body, and the sharp knife did not cause any harm to Lancelot at all. Scoff. Only when Lancelot controlled his body not to absorb the kinetic energy of the knife, did the sharp blade leave a light white mark on the back of Lancelot's hand. Originally Lancelot was going to test his resilience, but at this moment his body has surpassed the human limit by several times, ordinary knives can't cut his skin at all. My lord, these are your clothes. Mystique Raven opened the door and walked in. After placing the new clothes in front of Lancelot, she looked at the muscles on Lancelot obsessively, and then directly bullied her. 3 hours later, Mystique Raven was slumped to the ground, but Lancelot was still energetic. Raven, I can spend the whole day with you. Lancelot put on the clothes Raven sent, gave Raven a playful look, and said the famous words of Captain America. Let's go, the first battle has already begun. Lancelot bent down and picked up Raven, and then walked out of the room with Raven. His current ideal body doesn't have much energy reserves, he needs to absorb a lot of energy and store it. In the CIA headquarters building, Lancelot was sitting on his metal seat at the moment, casually playing with a high-explosive grenade with his right hand. In front of Lancelot, Gambit Remy LeBeau, Silver Fox Carla, Tank Fred, Phantom John, Cyborg Bradley, Mystique Raven, Toad Matthew, and Murloc Jack lined up on both sides. Bradley, what's the current situation at Xavier Manor? Lancelot glanced at Bradley, and then pulled the safety catch of the high-explosive grenade. Boom! The grenade exploded in an instant, but all the energy was blocked by Lancelot's hands, and then sucked into his body by Lancelot. At this moment, his face was full of comfort. Energy absorbing didn't expect to have such an effect. Feeling the increase in the strength of his cells, Lancelot couldn't help showing a smile. After absorbing the energy of this high-explosive grenade, Lancelot felt that the cells in his body seemed to be charging, and the quality and strength of the cells had improved significantly. My lord, the X-Men in Xavier Manor have finished their special training and are preparing to go to the high seas of Cuba. Bradley looked at Lancelot enthusiastically, and replied quickly. Raven, what about the Hellfire Club? Lancelot nodded noncommittally, and then looked at Raven at the side. Hellfire Club's nuclear submarine has appeared in Cuban waters. White Queen Emma is in charge of watching the actions of Black Emperor Shao. Mystique Raven quickly reported. Very well, the first battle is finally here. Lancelot looked at Wushwang with a pair of ruby eyes. This time, he was going to participate in the battle himself and step onto the stage that belonged to him. Xavier Estate. Professor X and others were preparing to go, but suddenly found that Beast Hank was missing. Professor X used telepathy to find Beast Hank almost instantly. Everyone in Professor X and X-Men looked at the blue-haired gorilla in front of them, and looked at each other for a while. That's not a mutant inhibitor, but a mutant growth hormone. It turns out that Mr. Lancelot already knew the effect of that drug. Beast Hank, who had metamorphosis into a blue-haired gorilla, couldn't help but said with a wry smile. 2 days ago, Hank McCoy finally made up his mind that he was going to abandon his mutant identity and become a real human being. Therefore, Hank McCoy injected what he thought was a mutant inhibitor without any hesitation, and then Beast Hank came into being. After becoming Beast, Hank McCoy's thinking has become irritable, and he has become smarter, and his thinking speed has also improved to varying degrees. Laugh. When boarding the supersonic plane, Beast Hank involuntarily injected Wolverine Logan with mutant growth hormone. Then Professor X and others saw Wolverine Logan transform into a 5-meter-long giant wolf, and the original rusty claws, under the action of the mutant growth hormone, shone coldly, like metal claws. And not long after the supersonic plane took off, a group of unexpected guests ushered in Xavier Manor. Dr. Leonard led a group of scientists in the brain field. After entering the Xavier Manor, they began to search for all the experimental manuscripts of Beast Hank, including the manufacturing drawings of the brain wave strengthening device. Hurry up, move quickly. We need to learn how to make a brain wave strengthening device when Professor X and others come back. Dr. Leonard stood in the X secret room, looked at the brain wave strengthening device in front of him, and began to study without sleep or food. My lord, Dr. Leonard has found the brain wave strengthening device. Bradley put down his right hand in the CIA headquarters building, and reminded him. Let's go, it's time for us to go. Lancelot nodded, then glanced at Phantom John. All the mutants in front of Lancelot immediately formed a circle, and then the phantom flickered, and Lancelot and others disappeared into the CIA building. On the high seas of Cuba, within the main ship of the Soviet fleet, Lancelot and others appeared in an instant. As the commander-in-chief of the battleship this time, General Overa Peterlove was suddenly taken aback. However, after seeing the person coming, General Overa immediately respectfully said, "My King Lancelot. Where's Emma?" Lancelot just casually glanced at General Overa, and then asked. "Miss Emma is on another ship," General Overa said respectfully. As the commander this time, no one knew that General Overa had been controlled by Lancelot's Gios. General Overa must obey Lancelot's orders until his own death or Lancelot cancels Gios. John, bring Emma here. Lancelot solemnly sat on the captain's seat of General Overa, and then gave orders to the Phantom John. Pong, pong. Phantom John flashed twice in succession, and then appeared in front of Lancelot with White Queen Emma. At this moment, White Queen Emma is wearing a beautiful military uniform. Her figure looks charming, but she is also heroic. Lancelot, my king, you have become different. As soon as she appeared in front of Lancelot, White Queen Emma threw herself into her arms. She looked at Lancelot in surprise. She had already seen Lancelot at the first sight. Realizing that the Lancelot in front of him has become different. Emma, thank you for your hard work. Lancelot patted White Queen Emma's butt lightly, and then his face became serious. These days, Emma has been monitoring Hellfire Club's Black Emperor Shao, and never slacks off. It is also because of White Queen Emma's ability that Lancelot knows the situation of Hellfire Club like the back of his hand. My lord, Professor X is here. White Queen Emma frowned slightly. Her spiritual power perception reached Professor X's spiritual power. It's faster than I thought. Lancelot looked out of the ship, and over the high seas of Cuba, a supersonic plane was flying at low altitude at the moment. And on the landing gear of the plane, Magneto is sensing the position of the nuclear submarine where He Huangshao is located with a solemn face. Black Emperor, Professor X and the others are here. At this moment in the high seas, the Red Devil Asazuo reminded the Black Emperor Shao in front of him with a serious face. Is it finally here? The torrent set off a tsunami. Hai Huangshao wore a mind-shielding helmet, his eyes slightly revealing madness. Yes, Black Emperor. Torrent Quest nodded, and then opened his hands. Outside the nuclear submarine, 2 large tornadoes were rapidly brewing. At the same time, the calm high seas were still choppy at the moment, and a tornado appeared on the bottom of the sea, and the impact was that a violent tsunami was set off on the sea surface. Rumble. The waves rolled, and the Soviet and American fleets that were anchored in the high seas suddenly began to approach the center of the waves uncontrollably. My lord, what should we do? Seeing his own fleet rushing towards the center of the high sea under the impetus of the tsunami, General Olvera suddenly asked in astonishment. Wait and see. Lancelot sat calmly on the seat, letting the tsunami outside wreak havoc and rolling. For Lancelot, wanting to end the Cold War confrontation. Song needs an order from Lancelot. Even if the mere human fleet is wiped out, Lancelot doesn't care. What he really cares about is the next first battle of Mutant. Fact, Black Emperor Shao's nuclear submarines are hidden too deep, I can't find them. On the landing gear of the supersonic aircraft, Magneto's face is gloomy, although he has released his metal control as much as possible. However, the position of He Huang Shao is really too deep. In particular, the sudden tsunami on the high seas affected Magneto's magnetic force, making it impossible for him to feel the unknown of He Huang Shao wholeheartedly. Magneto, don't worry about Black Emperor Shao. The tsunami is pushing the fleets of the two countries to collide. Once the collision occurs, the two superpowers will usher in the final nuclear war. Inside the plane, Professor X used his mind to power, swept the entire high seas, and had a panoramic view of the fleets of the two countries. Compared to finding Black Emperor Shao, Professor X obviously wants to prevent the war. Calm down, Eric. Looking at Magneto, who was still looking for the trace of He Huang Shao, Professor X couldn't help but use his own spiritual power to persuade Magneto. Charles, you fool. Magneto was stunned for a moment, and then he cursed sullenly, but still had to give up and continue to search for He Huang Shao's nuclear submarine. Boom. Magneto stretched his hands, and his whole body was suspended under the action of magnetism, and the violent magnetic force vented down along Magneto's hands. Kakaka. There were bursts of ear-piercing metal roars, and the warship that was being propelled by the tsunami began to float into the midair at this moment. What fark? Is this really a human? How is it possible? This must be an illusion. This time, whether it was a Soviet warship or a US military warship, all soldiers and commanders were dumbfounded. They looked at Magneto floating in the center of the two fleets in horror, and the warships floating towards the sky, and the entire sea area was silent for a while. As expected of Magneto, even Lancelot couldn't help looking up at Magneto in midair at this moment, and was full of admiration for Magneto. At this moment, Magneto stretched his hands, and under him were warships floating above the sea. Each warship weighs tens of tons, but at this moment it is just being controlled by Magneto. Get out of here. Magneto seemed to be pressing down on a huge mountain with both hands. He suddenly roared, and then controlled the warship with both hands, and threw the warship to the edge of the open sea. Rumble. Under the control of Magneto, the huge amounts of warship fell onto the high seas, causing huge splashes. General Wilhelms, the commander of the US warship, looked at the scene above the sea in horror at the moment. Magneto fell silent for a while. Turn the warship and aim the warship at the human beings in the sky. After a moment of silence, General Wilhelms gave the order decisively. Compared with the Cold War with the Soviet Union, the sudden mysterious human beings obviously pose a greater threat to human beings. Magneto, who was in midair, didn't see the warship below pointing his gun at him, and it was too much for Magneto to control the warship. Magneto's hands hang down feebly, and his whole body is also crumbling. Gray, go and give our comrades an injection. On the deck of the Soviet main ship, Lancelot looked at the crumbling Magneto in the sky with great interest, and then ordered. I obey, my king. On the deck, two pairs of butterfly wings with huge amounts of butterfly appeared behind Mutant Gray, and then her body quickly flew towards Magneto. The mutant of the House of Evolution. Fok, really haunts you. In the supersonic plane, Professor X looked at the butterfly girl Gray, who flew to Magneto's side at this moment, with a serious expression on his face, and cursed without a gentleman's demeanor. Hey, Mr. Magneto, you look a bit bad. Gray flew to Magneto's side, looked at Magneto, who was weak and crumbling, and took out a syringe directly from inside his clothes. Laugh. Gracie casually injected a tube of lavender potion into Magneto's body, and Magneto, who was originally weak, suddenly became alive and well. What is this thing? At this moment, Magneto only felt full of strength. He glanced at Gray with gratitude, and asked. This is the Vitality Recovery Potion developed by the scientists of our evolution house. It can restore your own mutant ability and make the cells full of vitality. Butterfly Girl Gray danced around Magneto, and then returned to where Lancelot was, above deck. Give full play to your abilities, Magneto, the Scene Man. Lancelot looked at Magneto in the sky with great interest, and then waited for the good show to begin. As a matter of fact, without making Lancelot wait for a long time, Magneto's hands were open, full of energy, so that Magneto no longer had any scruples. Rumble. The violent magnetic force was released, and then the seawater under his feet began to roll violently, and the nuclear submarine of Haiwangsha hiding in the seawater was forcibly pulled out by Magneto. Go to the nearby island. Professor X watched Magneto's movements, and then reminded him loudly. At the same time, Beast Hank controls the supersonic plane and flies towards the small island not far away. Kill them. Inside the nuclear submarine, Haiwangsha couldn't stand the group of X-Men anymore. He angrily roared an order to the mutant beside him. Boom. Afterwards, Haiwangsha and others stood in a circle. The Red Devil Asazuo's ability was activated, and Haiwangsha and others instantly appeared in the sky. Torrent Tornado. Torrent Quest turned his body and turned into a huge amounts of tornado falling from the sky. Wherever it passed, the sea flowed backwards, and the X-Men's supersonic plane was hit by the tornado and began to circle in the tornado. Magneto. The X-Men in the plane were dumped, and Professor X was even more anxious at the moment and sent out telepathy to Magneto. Trash Charles. Magneto, who was concentrating on manipulating the nuclear submarine, immediately cursed after hearing Professor X's cry for help, and then suddenly threw the nuclear submarine towards the island, while raising his left hand, and lifted the supersonic aircraft out of the tornado pulled out. After Magneto pulled the supersonic plane out, he opened his right hand and pushed towards the supersonic plane. Immediately under the magnetic force, the supersonic plane also fell towards the island. Rumble. On the small island, two huge amounts of steel creations were tumbling crazily, and then the nuclear submarine broke in the middle, and the X-Men's supersonic plane also rolled a few times, its wings broke, and it ran aground on the small island. Haiwangsha. Magneto ignored the X-Men on the island at all. He raised his head and glanced at the high-altitude Haiwangsha, and quickly flew towards the Haiwangsha with his whole body. Red Devil, go and kill those X-Men. I will destroy Magneto with my own hands. In the sky, Black Emperor Shao let go of the Dragonfly Girl Salvatore's arm, and quickly fell towards Magneto. Zhao Nujiao. Pong. And the Red Devil Azazuo appeared on the island with Riptide and Dragonfly. Magneto, you should have a bright future. But Professor X domesticated you and buried your ability. High in the sky, Magneto and He Huangshao collided with each other, and He Huangshao angrily shook his fist. Terrible energy burst out, directly smashing Magneto down from the sky. Look at what you are doing now, manipulating metal. Are you one Iron King? Haiwangshao's body descended from the sky, and the kinetic energy generated from the high altitude was absorbed by Haiwangshao when it touched the ground. He Huangshao fell from a high altitude, unscathed. On the other hand, Magneto fell from a high altitude. Although he was protected by magnetic force, he still threw a mess and was in a mess. X-Men, attack. Inside the supersonic plane, Beast Hank opened the hatch, and then Professor X led the X-Men to stand on the ground of the island. Looking at the three mutants from Hellfire Club opposite, Professor X didn't use his psychic power, he just handed over the stage to his X-Men. Finally, it's our turn. Siren Sean Cassidy was wearing a hang glider made of titanium alloy at the moment, moved his neck slightly, and then suddenly let out an overclocking scream. Whoosh! Under the counter-propelling force of this overfrequency scream, Sean the Sea Demon's body quickly soared into the air, and slid up in midair. He quickly swooped towards the mutant of the Hellfire Club, and then appeared above the heads of the three Red Devils. Boom! The three Red Devils felt as if their brains had been hit with a sledgehammer, and the overclocked screams made them dizzy. Salvador, you go to deal with the sea monster. The Red Devil Azazuo shook his head, then grabbed the Dragonfly Girl Salvador with his right hand, and threw Salvador out. Pong! Salvador's body disappeared in midair, and when she reappeared, she had already appeared in the sky above Sean, the sea monster. A pair of dragonfly wings quickly slapped Salvador and spit out a cloud of strong acid solution. Chi chi chi. The strong acid fell on the hang glider on Sean's body, and the hang glider made of titanium alloy skeleton was corroded in a large piece. Facing the Dragonfly Girl Salvador's attack, Sean the Siren dared not neglect. He screamed at the ground again, and then started a chase in the air. On the ground, Shockwave Alex also started his own battle. His body flashed with red light, and then a group of huge amounts of red energy column was released from the device on his chest. Facing Shockwave Alex's attack, Torrent Quest didn't dare to neglect, and released 2 huge amounts of tornadoes with his hands. The red energy column hit the tornado, instantly turning the tornado into a dazzling red. The torrent of tornado rotated rapidly, crazily stirring the energy released by Alex, and the 2 sides were deadlocked in time. Pong! And behind Alex, the red devil Azazuo appeared, grabbed Alex by the back collar, and threw him into the sky. Suddenly appearing in the sky, Alex couldn't help cursing one after another, and then he saw Shan, the sea monster, swooping down quickly and catching the falling Alex. Roar! Wolverine Logan let out a roar, and his whole body turned into a lone wolf with huge amounts of it. His limbs moved rapidly, and he rushed towards Hai Wangshao. Pong! Wolverine Logan directly threw Hai Wangshao to the ground, and then a pair of front paws pierced Hai Wangshao's shoulders, the sharp claws shone coldly, and the berserk power, even Hai Wangshao, couldn't break free at this moment. Fake squid! The originally elegant Black Emperor Shao cursed angrily at this moment, and suddenly patted Wolverine Logan's body with his right hand. Boom! As if Wolverine Logan's body had been hit by a missile, she immediately flew upside down tens of meters away, and her huge body directly hit the nuclear submarine on the coast. Falca! It was the first time that Hai Wangshao was in such a state of embarrassment. He stood up angrily, and then his palms met, and the energy in his body violently vented out. Go to hell with me! Hai Wangshao roared, and then his whole body was like a small nuclear bomb, and his head began to vibrate constantly. Hai Wangshao wanted to create a small nuclear explosion and raze the entire island to the ground. As this embarrassment turned into anger. On the distant deck, Lancelot looked at the majestic energy fluctuations in the direction of the island, and couldn't help shaking his head slightly. Hai Wangshao's ability development is also extremely low-end. It's just horrible. Lancelot looked at Hai Wangshao on the island in disappointment, and then slightly stepped on the ground with his right foot. Boom! Lancelot's right foot exploded with a huge mass of energy, and Lancelot's body instantly soared into the sky. Being in the sky, Lancelot adjusted the energy output of his body, his hands and feet gushed out energy, and Lancelot's body began to move forward like a Superman flight. In just a few seconds, Lancelot had already appeared above the island, and then Lancelot stopped outputting energy. Lancelot's body began to fall from the sky at an astonishing speed, and in just 2 seconds, Lancelot had already fallen to the ground of the island. The kinetic energy generated by gravity was instantly absorbed by Lancelot's body, and the energy originally consumed by flight increased rather than decreased BFCA. Without a sound, Lancelot landed in the center of the island, standing proudly in a Superman landing posture. Lancelot, Professor X and Magneto looked at Lancelot falling from the sky in astonishment, and then quickly stood together. And Hai Wangshao, who was about to make a small nuclear explosion, noticed Lancelot's appearance, but he couldn't stop now. The energy ball in his hand began to become dazzling, and terrifying energy was constantly released from Hai Wangshao's body. Lancelot just glanced at Hai Wangshao indifferently. This time he didn't release Gios immediately, but slightly stepped on the ground with his right foot, slightly adjusting the energy under his feet. Ability, a variant of Hai Wangshao, absorbs all forms of energy fluctuations and stores them in the body. This stored energy can be controlled by Hai Wangshao and released through the body. However, if the absorbed energy is simply released roughly, although the power is very powerful, it is too rough for Lancelot. So, Lancelot is going to teach Black Emperor Shao a lesson. Swish! Lancelot slightly released the energy in his body, and the energy under his feet instantly turned into kinetic energy. Lancelot's body was ejected instantly, running fast on the ground like a black panther. Speaking of which, Lancelot, who absorbs all energy, is not a piece of humanoid vibranium. His running speed hardly generates any energy, because all the energy is absorbed by Lancelot's body. In just an instant, Lancelot had already appeared in front of Hai Wangshao, and his right hand directly grabbed the red energy ball in Hai Wangshao's palm. Absorb! Lancelot's entire body was like a black hole, absorbing all the energy released by the Black Emperor Shao into his body. Pong! After absorbing the energy ball released by Hai Wangshao, Lancelot slapped Hai Wangshao away. At the same time, he moved his right hand slightly. Energy burst mode. Lancelot's body was instantly covered with a layer of golden energy fluctuations. This group of golden energy made him very similar to the future Captain Marvel. After the golden energy enveloped his whole body, Lancelot's body broke free from the shackles of gravity and floated in midair. Come on, let's have a good fight. Lancelot's ruby eyes also glowed with golden energy. He opened his right hand, and a bright golden beam of light swept across the sky, instantly shooting down Sean the Siren and Salvatore the Dragonfly flying above Lancelot's head. My fellow mutants, let me show you the power of the king. Lancelot looked down at the mutants at his feet. Then his eyes turned to Professor X first. Gios. Don't use your spiritual power on me, ever. A pair of birds fluttered out of Lancelot's eyes, and instantly flew into Professor X's eyes. And Professor X, who was planning to quietly use his spiritual power to control Lancelot, let out a scream, and then looked at Lancelot with horror and fear. Don't use your spiritual power on me, forever. On the small island, Professor X looked sluggish, and just now, a bright fiery red flying bird appeared in his spiritual world. In front of this flying bird, Professor X's spiritual power was completely powerless to resist, and then Professor X discovered that this flying bird was integrated with his own brain. And the voice of Lancelot appeared in the spiritual world of Professor X. A shackle appeared in Professor X's spiritual power, and Professor X realized that he would never be able to use spiritual power against Lancelot. Even simple telepathy can't be done. Even if Professor X wants to use it forcibly, the Osca shackles hidden in the depths of his spiritual power will appear in an instant, burning the teaching's idea into nothingness. At the same time, Professor X finally understands the power of Lancelot. Gios. The power of absolute command. Professor X stared in horror at Lancelot, who was exuding golden energy fluctuations and floating in the air, and was a little dazed for a moment. When Professor X was in a daze, Magneto was not idle. No matter who he was, he couldn't stop him from killing He Huang Shao. Magneto opened his hands, and behind Lancelot, a supersonic fighter floated up, and then smashed towards Lancelot. However, the imaginary impact did not occur. The kinetic energy and magnetic energy carried by the supersonic fighter jet had already absorbed all the energy into Lancelot's body the moment it touched Lancelot's body. Lancelot turned around and flicked at the supersonic plane behind him, releasing the energy absorbed before. Rumble. The huge amounts of supersonic aircraft in front of them were instantly shrouded in flames of explosions, but what was amazing was that the layer upon layer of explosions did not spread out from the supersonic aircraft at all. It was as if there was an invisible hand controlling the explosive energy. When the supersonic plane was blown into dust, the flames, energy, shockwave, etc. all rushed towards Lancelot's body. Flame and temperature are all material energy, perfectly absorbed by Lancelot. Unfortunately, the next time you build your ideal body with eye-catching, you must add the Gambit variant ability. After absorbing the energy produced by the explosion of a supersonic plane, Lancelot couldn't help shaking his head with a little regret. When he constructed his ideal body, he forgot to add Gambit's ability to manipulate kinetic energy. Boom! Lancelot looked down at Magneto, and then covered with golden energy fluctuations, he swooped down at super fast speed. Lancelot, come down for me. Shockwave Alex turned his spear on Lancelot's back as Lancelot charged towards Magneto, sending a wave of red energy at Lancelot's back. Lancelot just glanced back at the young Shockwave Alex indifferently, and then accepted this energy feast. The golden energy layer on Lancelot's body appeared a touch of red, and gradually became golden red. At this moment, Lancelot is like passing a piece of energy star armor. Roar! Beast Hank appeared in front of Lancelot. He roared angrily at Lancelot, and swung his two sharp claws towards Lancelot at a very fast speed. It's too slow. In Lancelot's eyes, Beast Hank's attack was as slow as a snail. He not only possesses the mutant ability of Black Emperor Shao, but also possesses the super soldier physique of Captain America. Captain America's physique is a physique that surpasses human beings in all aspects. Strength, physique, nerve response, speed, etc. Lancelot has reached 8 times that of humans. Although Beast Hank's attack was fast, in Lancelot's eyes, it was extremely slow. Lancelot just stretched out his right hand and grabbed Beast Hank's paw. Boom! Lancelot clenched his fist with his left hand, the muscles in his left hand tensed, and then he punched Beast Hank on the head, knocking Beast Hank into the air. After knocking Beast Hank into the air, Lancelot's right hand opened, and a ball of red energy was released, directly smashing Magneto from midair to the ground. You guys only have this level. Lancelot glanced at Professor X and Magneto with some disappointment, and his body slowly fell down. Roar! Just after Lancelot landed on the ground, Wolverine Logan turned into a 5-meter-tall giant wolf and rushed towards Lancelot. Pong! Facing Wolverine Logan, Lancelot didn't make any evasive movements, not even using his testosterone absorption. Pissed, Lancelot let Wolverine Logan's half-meter-long claws penetrate into his body, and pierced through. Base. Wolverine Logan's right front paw swayed slightly, directly lifted Lancelot's body into the air, and then smashed heavily on the ground. Have we killed Lancelot? The X-Men all stopped at this moment, looking at Lancelot whose chest was pierced. For a while, he was a little stunned and disbelieving. On Hai Wangshao's side, Hai Wangshao's eyes were gloomy, and he didn't know what he was thinking. On the left and right sides of Hai Wangshao, there are respectively the Red Devil Azazuo and Torrent Quest. Hey, I should also add a pain control to my body. Just when everyone was looking at Lancelot, Lancelot sat up on the ground. He lowered his head and glanced at the wound on his body. He was recovering at a super fast speed at the moment. In just a few breaths, the piercing wound caused by Wolverine Logan had disappeared. Wolverine Logan's self-healing factor. It can be called the existence of regenerative healing factor. It's not bad, although it hurts a bit, but it's not unbearable. Lancelot stood up from the ground, reaching out to pat the dust off his body. How is it possible? How is it possible that you are not dead? I have already pierced your heart. Wolverine Logan looked at Lancelot in astonishment and then stared at Lancelot again. Get out. Lancelot raised his hand slightly, and a group of golden and red energy cannons were released instantly from his right hand. The violent energy cannon instantly sent Wolverine Logan flying tens of meters away. Swish! The energy in Lancelot's body exploded, instantly appearing on the path of Wolverine Logan flying backwards, and then a whip-lag, carrying billowing energy, kicked Wolverine Logan flying like a ball. Pong pong pong. And Lancelot's body energy continued to explode, appearing behind Wolverine Logan like a phantom, and kicked Wolverine Logan away again. On the small island, one after another energy roars sounded, and Lancelot almost exploded with the Wolverine Logan hammer. Under Lancelot's fist and energy impact, Wolverine Logan's huge body quickly became riddled with holes. Pong! Lancelot punched Wolverine Logan's head again. The violent force made Wolverine's head dented, and Wolverine Logan passed out directly. Now, you only have two choices. Surrender, or die. Lancelot floated into the air again, looking down at the X-Men on the island and Hai Wangshao from the Hellfire Club, and others, and issued an ultimatum to both parties. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.